Good morning, everybody. Good morning, fellow council members.
Morning.
Thanks to all of you for being here. I'm going to go ahead and get this meeting started. My name is Lance Robertson. I'm the Assistant Secretary for Aging at the Department of Health and Human Services and the Administrator for the Administration for Community Living. Again, very glad to have everyone here. I am the Delegated Chair for the Elder Justice Coordinating Council and honored to open this meeting. We have roughly 50 folks who we know chose to join us in person. We also have, we anticipate, several hundred folks who are watching online. So hello to everyone, and thanks so much for being here. Most critically, thanks again to the fellow council members who made sure that their calendars were well protected so that you could be here and you could join us. As you'll see assembled before you, we do have representatives from 12 of the federal agencies that are part of the Elder Justice Coordinating Council. Unfortunately, neither the Department of Interior nor the Department of the Treasury were able to join us today, but the other 12 are represented. And again, the purpose, as you will note from the agenda, is to really have some remarks, brief remarks from each of the federal agencies on what's happening specifically around elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation. We do have an agenda that I'm sure that most of you have seen, and of course, for fellow council members, you did receive your portfolio in advance, so hopefully you've had a chance to take a look at both the agenda and then also digest the contents of the package you received. Following opening remarks, we are going to have a presentation on elder abuse in different settings, and we'll introduce all three of those presenters shortly when that time arrives. Very glad to have them here and glad that they will be sharing their expertise. Then, as we have traditionally done, we're going to go ahead and hear from each participating agency who sits on the council. And we have, just to keep the agenda flow a little more palatable, we have divided the presentation, so you won't hear from 12 in a row. We'll probably do roughly 6 or 7 at the beginning. Then we're going to actually have a report on the National Adult Maltreatment Reporting System, which we all know, NAMERS. And we have a couple of colleagues from the Administration for Community Living who will provide you an update on NAMERS. Then we'll pivot and go ahead and have the remaining federal agencies present. And then we will have closing remarks. So I think it will be a highly informative several hours together. And again, want to express my thanks to all of you for being here. Again, we have a great meeting planned for today, one that highlights the importance of the work that we do on this council, as well as focuses our attention on how elder maltreatment presents and can be addressed by all of us in different settings across the country. Our agenda is tight today, and therefore we're not actually taking questions from the audience during the meeting. However, if you do have something to share with the council, we would ask that you please note that we continue to have an opportunity for public input. If you go to the ACL website, you will see an opportunity there to submit your remarks, again, primarily for feedback you might have for the council relative to our work and for the year to come. So we are, of course, keenly interested in what thoughts you might have relative to best practices or things that are happening that you're aware of that really can help address abuse, neglect, and exploitation in our country. So again, I think that all of you will hopefully jump on that website. Again, it's acl.gov. You'll see the link on there, and you can have an opportunity to, in writing, submit that request. That opportunity, though, does close the end of this month, so you have until December 31st to submit that, and we will, again, be very grateful for any input that you might have. So with that, I think we're going to go ahead and jump into our first panel. And because of the layout of the room, and for those online you may not be familiar, traditionally we would have a table in front of us, and the panel would present in front of us as the council. But given the setup, what we're actually going to do this time is have them come to the podium. So what I want to do then is introduce the three presenters for the first panel, and then each will come up, make their remarks. And then should we as a council have any questions, obviously I hope you'll be taking copious notes, and if you do have any feedback, remarks, questions, there will be at the end an opportunity for us as a council to ask those members of the panel any questions we might have. So recent news reports of abuse and neglect in long-term care facilities have reminded us all of the importance of a strong safety net in nursing homes, group homes, and other congregate living settings. Abuse anywhere is unacceptable, whether that is in an assisted living facility by an aide, or in an older adult's home by a trusted relative, or even online by a stranger. So we'll start our meeting by learning more about elder abuse across residential settings, from long-term care facilities to community settings. And today, we're very pleased to have with us 3 experts that are going to address this topic with us, and I want to quickly introduce them to you, and then I'll call each respectively to the podium. So the moderator for the panel is Dr. Pamela Teester. Dr. Teester is a professor of human development and family science at Virginia Tech and the director of the Virginia Tech Center for Gerontology. Her principal areas of research focus include elder and vulnerable adult mistreatment, public and private guardianship, financial exploitation of older adults, end-of-life issues and decision-making, and finally, ethical treatment and human rights issues. So again, we're glad to have Dr. Teester moderating the panel. The 2 individuals that are part of the panel, Mr. Bob Blancato. Bob is the president of Matz Blancato and Associates, and he is the national coordinator of the bipartisan 3,000-member Elder Justice Coalition. And he is executive director of the National Association of Nutrition and Aging Services Programs. Bob has more than 20 years of service in the congressional and executive branches, including the senior staff of the U.S. House Select Committee on Aging and an appointment by President Clinton to be executive director of the 1995 White House Conference on Aging. Bob is also the chair of the board of the American Society on Aging and the national board of AARP. And then the other panelist is Lori Spentaka, and she is executive director of the National Consumer Voice for Quality Long-Term Care, the leading national nonprofit advocacy organization representing consumers receiving long-term care and services in nursing homes, assisted living facilities, and home and community-based settings. As executive director, Lori oversees and contributes to the organization's policy, advocacy, and program activities, leads the organization's fundraising efforts, establishes strategic partnerships with organizations and federal agencies working on issues related to the provision of long-term services and supports, and finally establishes a strategic direction of the organization. So again, with that, we have allocated roughly a half hour, fellow council members, for the panel to present to us. And again, Dr. Teester will be the moderator, followed by, I'm assuming, formal presentations by Mr. Blancato and Ms. Smetanka. So with that, Dr. Teester. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. Being a woman, I am told of a certain age, aren't we all? I was advised not to wear red boots with high heels, but I prevailed. Thank you so very much, especially Secretary Lance Robinson, Elder Justice Coordinator Tony Bacon, and Ms. Hillary Dalen for inviting me to make opening remarks for this December 23rd meeting of the Elder Justice Coordinating Council. For this section of the meeting, I am joined by absolutely wonderful colleagues, Lori Smetanka, Executive Director of Consumer Voice, and Robert Bob Blancato, National Coordinator for the Elder Justice Coalition. Bob Blancato, whom I came to know through our mutual work on the National Committee for the Prevention of Elder Abuse, has been my mentor and dear friend for nearly 20 years. He has guided me both personally and professionally, and he continues to do so to this very day. Thank you, Bob. I've been privileged to conduct research on elder abuse for over 20 years now, and with a team of colleagues, I have been most fortunate to be the recipient of funds from a variety of federal agencies and private foundations that has allowed us all to examine issues of elder abuse in both community and facility settings. The settings of abuse have a great deal to do with the research questions we ask, as well as the interests of the funder and the type of abuse that we are trying to understand. Among the EJCC member agencies present here, I have been able to conduct studies funded by the Department of Justice, the Social Security Administration, and the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, particularly the National Institutes on Aging and the Administration for Community Living. One of our ongoing studies, funded by the Retirement Research Foundation, examines elder abuse by surrogate perpetrators. These would be powers of attorney, guardians, and representative payees. The data collection for that study ends on the 14th of December at midnight. We chose to examine victims who resided in the community at the time of the allegation because there were simply far more abuse instances occurring in community settings, and because all adult protective services programs, this is where we're getting our data from around the country, have the authority to investigate in community settings. Far fewer adult protective service programs investigate adult protective services in facility settings. Also, and presently, and I suspect you will hear more about that today, you will learn that ACL has funded WIRMA to examine how APS is affected by the opioid crisis, something that I, while at the University of Kentucky, began to discern many, many years before funding ever started flowing to address the problem, as well as the flow of drugs going everywhere. Another strand of work, a 5-year Virginia Adult Protective Services study conducted with my dear friend Dr. Karen Roberto of the sexual abuse of vulnerable adults, revealed that far more abuse occurred in the community setting than in the facility setting. Of the sexual assault that occurred in facilities, the majority tended to be resident to resident. The Virginia study became the impetus for later work on resident-to-resident abuse, funded by NIA and conducted by Drs. Tony Rosen, Carl Pillemer, and Mark Lax. Later, Holly Ramsey Klosnick and I were funded by the National Institute on Aging to examine the sexual assault of people residing in facility settings, the RFA specified facility settings, and my grants manager sits out there in the audience today, Dr. Sid Stahl. Only 4.5%, or about 1.5 million of older adults, live in nursing homes, and 2% in assisted living facilities. The majority of older adults, that would be 93.5%, or 33.4 million, live in the community. 10,000 Americans turn 65 every day, and someday I'm going to join their ranks. 5% of older adults live in a nursing home. Of these, about 50% of nursing home residents are 85 years of age and older. 35% are between the ages of 75 and 84, and 15% are lower, 65 and 74 years of age. Only 5% of older adults are in nursing homes at any given time, though about 25% of older adults may require some form of nursing care at some point. In the past 15 years, thanks to the fervent efforts of people in this room and some of your predecessors, research on elder abuse and hence evidence-based practices and accurate estimates of its prevalence are now possible where they were not. When I entered the field, colleagues at the NIA wondered if it would even be possible for a beginning scholar to become tenured on an elder abuse research agenda, and it was, and others followed. Prior to that time, funding was extremely limited, with the bulk of it allocated to medical inquiry. It proved to be possible, as it is for many researchers presently, that many types of individuals with many types of training can be funded to conduct wonderful, wonderful, important research. Thanks to funding opportunities and zealous advocacy of many people whom I admire, research and interest in the topic of elder abuse has increased tremendously in the last decade. We now know the importance of multidisciplinary teams, and we must support them for resolving investigations, for identifying abuse, and for prosecuting elder abuse. We are making inroads into training first responders, such as EMTs and ER docs, the police and detectives, and bank tellers, most notably through the recently launched Bank Safe initiative through AARP that was just released, to recognize elder mistreatment and to intervene better and faster, thanks to research conducted on this topic. Not surprisingly to anyone here, answering one question is not, and so the early and groundbreaking work has led to the need to answer more sophisticated questions, including, but not limited to, the long-term effects of elder abuse. That means following people over time. The effects of decisional capacity on elder abuse, risk and protective factors for exploitation, neglect, self-neglect, understanding more deeply the sequelae of exploitation and its long-term consequences. And I might add that Bob and my other colleagues on the 2 MetLife studies we attempted did try to do this very early. And prevention. Better screening tools will enable better remedies and better intervention. In particular, I want to emphasize the importance of studying and understanding the perpetrators of abuse. My colleague I mentioned, Karen Roberto, and I have conducted foundational work on this topic. We have scoured the literature, identifying polyvictimization and defining it within the elder abuse literature, and currently, using Adult Protective Services cases in Kentucky, we are examining the perpetrators of abuse where opioids are involved. We have also conducted an ecological study of the prosecution of elder abuse cases, in which we studied the application of Kentucky Revised Statute 209 as it involved judges, prosecutors, victims and their families, and jurors. And following in the steps of Georgia Annetsberger and Jordan Cosberg's work in the early 90s, we interviewed people on parole and some in jail. Andy, this is for you. I even had to have my husband do some of the questions early because I was so afraid I would question those people on parole and be bad at it, because I was so afraid they would hear me thinking, why did you do that? He did a great job with it. The offenders were largely in the community whom we interviewed, but one was a CNA in a facility, Sid. He was accused of sexual assault and prosecuted for it. Recent events in my personal life have brought home the vulnerability I have recognized in my data sets. My husband, a prosecutor and a public defender who practiced in Virginia and Kentucky for 25 years, and who had recently retired from the law to pursue his dream of being a movie and television screenwriter, experienced a significant stroke on Halloween that has left him with impairments in vision, word finding, and cognitive processing. Our goal is that he can return to screenwriting, for which he has also already won a number of awards, and on Friday, the Hollywood Just for Shorts award for his movie pilot, Connie, based on a Kentucky lawyer. What I have realized is how easy it would be for an artful and designing person to take advantage of him, to take his credit card, to pose to be someone who has no intention of helping, and isolate him from friends and families. Our research and practice and awareness can stop that scenario from playing out for others, and my zeal to do this is obviously renewed. I have a new appreciation for the dedication and volume of work that caregivers and the large and needed village of family and friends who help them, and how, in despite of loving someone very much, how hard the work can be, as well as joyful. And I have a redoubled appreciation for members of the sandwich generation, whose ranks I again join, having the care of a 63-year-old, the care of a 10-year-old, and the help of a 21-year-old college student at the University of Virginia, who absolutely beat us after 15 years in football on Friday. We must help families help older adults better through mechanisms such as the Elder Caring Coordination Initiative that is gaining ground in Florida and Canada. We must consider how to bolster formal and informal caregivers in their important work for their loved ones. We must support people whose decision-making is compromised so that they can exercise the greatest autonomy possible and enjoy a life that is as full and healthy as possible. And we must do this morally and ethically and grounded in a foundation established by the best science and thinking possible. This is my charge to all of you. Thank you for being here, and thank you for supporting the cause of elder justice. And I hope we have a great day.
Thank you, Pam, thank you so much. I appreciate your remarks and certainly the personal testimony. I did actually read your written testimony prior, and I read about your husband. So again, thank you for sharing both your professional and personal experiences with us. So we'll ask Pam to step aside now, and even though you're the moderator.
I can moderate from anywhere.
Can you moderate from anywhere?
Yeah.
You're so talented. Thank you. We appreciate that. Thank you, Pam.
Sure.
Again, I know members of the council, please, if you do have questions for Pam, hold those, and we'll do those once the other two speakers have spoken. So with that then, Bob Lancato, who I assume most of you know, has just a wee bit of experience in this program area. Known kind of as a national champion, and I'm so glad to call him a friend and a colleague and somebody that, again, we all know is just very passionate about this topic. We shared his bio previously, so with that then, Bob, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Lance. And I welcome the opportunity to testify this morning. I remember speaking at the first meeting of the EJCC, and you have come a long way. I especially commend Administrator Robertson for increasing the stature and the reach of the EJCC. As we approach the 10th anniversary of the Elder Justice Act and its expected reauthorization, the EJCC stands as one of its success stories. Today, 14 agencies are working to coordinate the federal response to elder abuse. You do this by sharing information and resources and new initiatives. But let's add 3 things going forward. 1, let's finally have an annual total of federal funds being used to fight elder abuse. Number 2, let's create a dedicated website to list all resources of your member agencies, whether they're websites, products, or dedicated offices. And number 3, let's think about convening the advisory board to complement your work and open a new channel for public input. Today, roughly 95% of older adults live outside of long-term care facilities, and the pure number of older adults in community is growing. So is elder abuse. The World Health Organization estimates that 1 in 6 persons 60 and over experienced some form of abuse in their communities in the past year. We have stunning increases in reports of adult abuse to APS at the state and local level. In a recent informal survey of states conducted by the National Adult Protective Services Association, noted significant increases in reports and cases. Some noted over 100% increases since 2011. This is occurring in all states. We need more data collection. You can't stop what you don't know. I commend the NAMRIS system for APS and its importance to obtaining better data on reported elder abuse. In this environment, good data can lead to more dollars. I also salute ACL's work in 3 other areas: addressing abuse in American Indian and Alaska Native communities, supporting programs dedicated to preventing guardianship abuse, especially the WINGS program, and the work we have both done to identify the emerging link between the misuse of opioids and elder abuse. I urge the EJCC to play a stronger inside game in making sure that new resources in the opioid fight are directed to community-based groups, especially APS. I also salute the Senior Corps in their addressing the opioid crisis and its impact on older adults, especially the work they do in 25 states in drug take-back activities. The Aging Network must play a stronger role in addressing elder abuse in the community. The current mandate of the Older Americans Act to train all those working with older adults about elder abuse must be accelerated, especially for those who see older adults in their homes, including the Home Delivered Meals program and the safety check that needs to accompany that meal. As we focus more on social isolation, there is a link to elder abuse. The average victim is an older woman living alone between 75 and 80. It is no surprise or accident that the largest number of reports made to APS are for self-neglect. Much of what is labeled as self-neglect is directly related to isolation. Programs that provide for socialization for those living alone must be seen as contributing to reducing elder abuse, and the EJCC should identify these programs and work to coordinate and strengthen them. A new threat to older adult safety are robocalls that lead to financial exploitation. We salute the FTC and its new Elder Justice Coordinator and its filing of more than 100 lawsuits against 600 of the worst companies and individuals responsible for billions of these bogus calls. Also, the FCC for its work to force major telecommunication companies to better protect consumers from these calls. And finally, the great ongoing work of the Justice Department, and especially Tony Bacon, in rounding up and prosecuting hundreds of scam and fraud artists who are targeting older adults. But the EJCC must also be concerned about abuse in institutional settings. I know Congress is concerned on a bipartisan basis, having recently testified before both the Senate Finance and the House Ways and Means Committee on this. The OIG and HHS has issued some disturbing reports spotlighting not only the prevalence of abuse, but the stunning failure to report by state survey agencies. Most every federal agency vested with responsibility to address abuse in long-term care facilities is in the EJCC. This means you are a unique and important advocacy voice on behalf of reforms. Specifically, the EJCC should call on CMS and other relevant agencies to improve their work around enforcement of existing laws protecting nursing home residents. CMS recently announced a change to Nursing Home Compare by adding an icon next to any facility that has been cited for poor quality of care. That is only a first step. The data submitted to earn a rating from CMS must be audited more than once a year. I urge better coordination between federal agencies and emergency preparedness plans for nursing homes in times of disasters. To that end, FEMA under DHS should be made part of the EJCC in the future. I call on the EJCC to urge HHS to designate LGBTQ older adults as an underserved population to get more accurate data on the extent of elder abuse in this community. The EJCC should also support more dedicated funding or a set-aside of funds from the Victims of Crime Act to help elder abuse victims of crime, and also support APS and Ombudsman increased access to funding for their services in helping elder abuse victims. We urge you to advocate with OMB for adequate funding levels for those key programs needed to combat elder abuse, in particular, the Social Services Block Grant, which is the primary source of federal funding that states can elect to use to fund at least a portion of their APS programs. Also, funding should be provided to allow Ombudsman to have more direct access to assisted living facilities to help prevent growing elder abuse, as spotlighted in a recent GAO report. Let's have the EJCC lead the administration's response to the expected bill to reauthorize the Elder Justice Act. And let's have the EJCC and our Elder Justice Coalition hold a joint webinar spotlighting specific offices within the EJCC, such as your Office of Elder Justice and the DOJ and FTC Elder Justice Coordinators, to better notify stakeholders of their important work. And finally, Lance, a repeat recommendation. Let's convene a full meeting of the EJCC outside of Washington, D.C. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, Bob. I have made note of your recommendations. Thank you, sir. And again, we'll have, if you do have any questions for Bob, again, if you'll hold those, we will have an opportunity to ask some clarification from Bob. But with that, Lori, we're so glad to have you here this morning. Thank you for the great work that you do with Consumer Voice. And we've done the introduction, so most everyone knows a little bit about you.
Great.
With that, the floor is yours, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Good morning, Administrator Robertson, Coordinator Bacon, and other members of the council. Thank you for inviting me to be here today. The National Consumer Voice for Quality Long-Term Care has been advocating for individuals receiving long-term care and services for nearly 45 years. We advocate for policies that support quality long-term care, empower and educate consumers, and equip advocates with information and resources that they need for their work. The Consumer Voice operates the National Long-Term Care Ombudsman Resource Center, funded by a grant from the Administration for Community Living, through which we provide technical assistance, support, and training to state and local long-term care ombudsmen. We appreciate the important work of the Elder Justice Coordinating Council and the work that's been done by the participating agencies to address elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation. Abuse of elders continues to be underreported and underinvestigated for individuals living in community-based settings, as well as those living in congregate care settings such as nursing homes and assisted living facilities. Increased efforts to prevent, investigate, and prosecute abuse, as well as to support victims, remains necessary as concerns about abuse, neglect, and exploitation of older adults continue to rise. At the Consumer Voice, we regularly hear from long-term care consumers, their families, ombudsmen, and other advocates stories about the abuse, neglect, and exploitation that continue to both shock and sadden all of us. A sample of the cases that recently have been shared with us include a resident who was beaten in the elevator of her nursing home by another resident who had psychiatric issues and was not being appropriately cared for and monitored by staff. An elderly woman receiving care in her home had her opioid pain medication stolen by her home health nurse, who replaced them with a variety of other pills. Other caregivers unknowingly gave her the substituted pills. The woman suffered an excruciating pain without her pain medication and with serious other side effects until the family became suspicious of the nurse and sought help. A contract construction worker was caught performing a sexual act on a resident, a woman living with dementia, in her assisted living apartment. The incident was not reported to police or to the family for several days, during which time the worker continued his job in the assisted living facility and was witnessed on the resident's floor continuing that work. A male resident with dementia was given antipsychotic medication for the purpose of sedating him for the convenience of staff. He was exhibiting behaviors that staff didn't like. The FDA had issued a black box warning on the use of antipsychotic drugs in elderly dementia patients, putting them at risk of serious illness or death. The resident soon after subsequently died. We're not the only ones hearing these stories. Cases like these are regularly told in the news, referenced in studies and reports, and shared at congressional hearings. A recent study from the General Accounting Office indicates that abuse deficiencies in nursing homes more than doubled between 2013 and 2017 and were categorized at higher levels of harm. Investigative reporting by CNN and more recently the Atlantic Journal-Constitution, among others, highlight disturbing incidences of abuse against residents. With the aging of our population nationally, the potential for abuse and neglect of elders is increasing. 10,000 baby boomers turn 65 each day. Nearly 70% of those individuals will need long-term care and services in their lifetime. And 1 in 4 people over the age of 65 will develop dementia, a likelihood that increases with age. As a society, it is incumbent upon us to intensify our efforts and to combat elder abuse and neglect at all levels and in all settings, as well as support and seek justice for those who are victimized. In each of the cases that I mentioned earlier, action was taken to hold accountable those responsible for the abuse that occurred, but we know that is frequently the exception rather than the rule. Too often, justice for the victim is never obtained, and individuals committing these acts may go on to abuse others. Progress, however, is being made. With the leadership of the agencies represented here on the council and collaborations between national, state, and local partners and the private sector, we are seeing important strides forward to address elder abuse. In Georgia, for example, the Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program, Adult Protective Services, state and local law enforcement and prosecutors and other partners have banded together to stop benefits trafficking of vulnerable adults living in board and care homes. A working group in New York that includes Adult Protective Services, the Attorney General's Office, law enforcement, and the Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program is addressing systemic issues and identifying solutions to discharges of nursing home residents due to non-payment, where family members were receiving the resident's income but not paying their bills. In Kentucky, multi-agency regional groups made up of agencies and programs with responsibility for investigating and combating abuse and neglect of long-term care residents meet quarterly to identify current trends and systemic issues and identify solutions. And at the Consumer Voice, we are working in partnership with colleagues such as the Elder Justice Coalition, coordinated by Mr. Blancato, to advocate for policies that would promote elder justice, and have been working with national partners and sister resource centers to raise awareness of and provide education and resources to consumers and advocates around elder abuse and related issues. But more must be done. To prevent even one more elder from being the victim of abuse, neglect, or exploitation, we recommend a number of different solutions. First, improving data collection and reporting is critical. Support efforts for enhancing data collection and sharing in order to better understand the scope of the problem of elder abuse and determine effective best practices for allocation of resources. The recently implemented National Adult Maltreatment Reporting System for Adult Protective Services and revisions to the National Ombudsman Reporting System are positive steps forward in collecting much-needed data on this issue. Additional data should also occur through CMS, including a GAO recommendation that abuse and perpetrator type be submitted by state survey agencies in CMS's database for deficiency, complaint, and facility-reported incident data, and that the agency systemically assess trends in these data. We also recommend promoting greater collaboration among federal partners and agencies and programs. Bring your sister agencies and departments that have responsibility for programs or services to elders to the table to engage them in efforts to adequately investigate and respond to allegations of elder abuse and enforce requirements that already exist. Raise the visibility of the community-based efforts such as the Elder Justice Task Forces and multidisciplinary teams, and work to expand them to all communities nationwide. Encourage and support policies that improve the reporting of abuse and suspicions of crimes to the agencies with the authority and responsibility to investigate and hold accountable those who fail to report. We also recommend investing additional resources in or requesting that additional resources be allocated for training and support around investigation and prosecution. Expand and increase the availability of training opportunities for prosecutors, law enforcement officers, and judges on issues related to elder abuse, including the identification and investigation of abuse, neglect, and exploitation, as well as related issues such as dementia, capacity, guardianship, supported decision-making, and trauma-informed care. Include in the training multidisciplinary partners such as the long-term care facility surveyors, long-term care ombudsmen, adult protective services, and others who have a role in investigating abuse or advocating for residents in long-term care facilities. Provide support and mentoring for prosecutors around pursuing cases of abuse, neglect, and exploitation, particularly in cases where the victim has dementia or lacks capacity. We also recommend ensuring that victim supportive services are extended to individuals who reside in long-term care facilities. Our experience is that these services are not as widely available to victims of abuse in nursing homes or assisted living as for those living in community settings. And finally, we recommend raising public awareness and understanding of elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation by establishing a date certain for launching the broad-based public awareness campaign recommended by this council in your recommendations. Include council partners and other stakeholders in a coordinated effort that draws attention to this issue and put awareness of elder abuse on par with child abuse and domestic violence. Offer tips and strategies for preventing abuse, as well as resources for getting help for those who have been victimized. The 8 recommendations for increased federal involvement in addressing elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation adopted by this council set an important framework for moving the needle forward in this arena. Each of the recommendations I mentioned above fits within at least one of the recommended areas identified by this council. I and the Consumer Voice thank the Elder Justice Coordinating Council for the opportunity to discuss these important issues with you today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Lori. Again, appreciate your remarks. I'd like to ask you to stay here if you don't mind, and
Sure.
Bob and Pam, if you would please come up. As chair, I'd like to actually allocate a little bit of time for any questions or clarifications so desired by the council. So with that, then, I would like to ask by raising your hand, please, is there a council member that has a question for any member of this panel? Have you had your coffee yet this morning? Everybody okay? I will remind you that in your packet, amongst several other documents I'll reference later, you do actually have a copy of the written testimony of each of these 3 individuals, should you choose to go back and digest that at a later time. Again, I've read all 3, and certainly thank you for the specificity that each of you provided. You know, Bob and Lori, particularly for your recommendations. Thank you. Very helpful. Any questions before I jump to mine? Okay, you get Lance. I have, I'll, for sake of time, if you don't mind, I'll ask each of you a question, just to, again, compliment the remarks you've already provided, but also just to thank you so much for being here and sharing your experiences and your expertise. So Pam, really, again, what struck me in your remarks was that long-term impact of abuse. And I often wonder, because we're, in our society, we're all about that immediate remedying of the situation and trying to get things fixed, but not really looking long-term. Is there maybe a word or two you might share about some of that long-term impact that as a council we need to be reminded, yes, we have to stop, and if we can't stop, we have to, as quickly as possible, address, but we also, I think, as federal agencies have to be mindful of that long-term commitment we're all making. So Pam, any words you might share?
I think it's absolutely critical, Secretary Robertson, that we think about those issues, because you're exactly right. We've focused a great deal on intervention. We've focused some on prevention, although I don't know what our outcomes are on that measure. But I do think that some people are decimated by these experiences. Some people, just as all human beings, some people rebound from them, but some of them never recover. They become depressed. You have health care issues and concerns. They are unable to rebound financially. They are at a terrible place in that particular predicament, and their family members suffer. The unfortunate gift keeps on giving through generations. Think that. Many of us in this room would have expected intergenerational transfers, right, at some point in your life. And those change when, for example, exploitation occurs and finances are off the table. Then the heirs continue to suffer the effects of that. So the long-term effects are not just the older people, but their families and the communities for a long time. So we don't know that, because that's a longitudinal study I'd love to do. So.
Yeah, no, but your points are great on how many generations that incident may impact,
Right.
whether it's financial or horrific abuse, physically or whatever. Thank you, Pam. Bob, so many questions. That's why we have lunch every couple of months, right? So we can sit down and dig through them. I want to focus on your single question for me today on your recommendation about FEMA. And I know for my colleagues at the Administration for Community Living, we work closely with FEMA, but you're right. I think the recommendation about potentially having FEMA as part of the council, or at least better invested in what we're talking about, makes sense. So do you have any Any silver bullets, any suggestions on how we can most effectively bring FEMA to the table?
Well, I'll start by saying invite them to join the EJCC and have them come in and then, dedicate a session about emergency preparedness. One of your council meetings could be on that. I think every agency has a role in dealing with the issue of disasters and their impact on nursing homes, long-term care facilities. And it's really about coordination. There are plans out there, but there's got to be some degree of leadership that's exhibited. And I think if FEMA were in the room at the table and you did a session on that, I think that would be a good first step.
And we may invite you to be a part of some of those conversations, Bob. We really, I think, have, at least in my experience, seen some traction in the last couple of years in working with FEMA, but I believe we still have a ways to go. And your recommendation is a good one, and we may actually have some of your influence in making sure they're fully invested in the conversations we're having.
Okay.
So thank you, Bob. Lori, again, you kind of started off, and I thought you were just doing a great job of talking about some of the promising practices. And I really focused in on just the multidisciplinary teams and some of the states you gave examples and giving that national perspective that you get to have. Would there be a particular state or a particular area that you might call out of those that you gave examples of?
Well, I think there are a number of promising practices that we are hearing from all over the country. We ask ombudsman programs each year to share with us best practices happening in their states around this particular issue. And some of the ones that I highlighted today, including from Georgia, were some of the best practices that we are seeing. And so certainly the work that's being done on the multidisciplinary level is really critical for enhancing the activities around elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation, and bringing all of the resources together to make a difference for the victims.
Excellent, Lori. Tony will remember we were, I think it was last year in Iowa, and we got to see an MDT that really was just kind of taking off, and Andy was there. I mean, I thought it was really refreshing how at a local level they had sort of committed, hey, we're going to get this resolved, and the number of folks involved in that team was pretty amazing. Tony, do you remember that experience?
I do, and it was, I think, especially helpful to see how they all interacted amongst themselves and were able to build ideas off one another. And that's really important in rural communities, which was, I know, an area of great focus for this council over the last year, where resources are further and farther between and might be harder to come by with longer distances to travel. The idea of teamwork and coordination becomes increasingly important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It certainly affects not only the sharing of resources, but levels the reach, the efforts of communication, the sharing of best practices and solutions that can be taken place, including out-of-the-box solutions that each of the different partners brings to the table is really helpful.
All right. Thank you. All right, fellow council members, again, I hope you found that as informative as I did. Again, these are three really network champions, folks that have had a lot of experience in dealing with elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation from their, I guess, really more national perspectives. I think they're able to share some timely and good information for us. The recommendations, again, that they shared today are reflected in your written statement, in their written statements that are in your notebook. Also, I'll remind you, if you haven't had a chance to digest your preparatory notebook, you've got the research and grants subcommittee recommendations that are in there for the Elder Justice Coordinating Council. That's fresh, that's new. You know, we had a phone call on that earlier in the year, but that's an opportunity, again, to just be reminded of some of the research priorities that have come out of that subcommittee, and I'm thankful for that subcommittee's work. You also have, of course, the 8 recommendations, now about a 5 or 6 year old list of recommendations adopted by some of our cohorts in previous years, but again, a good document to look at. You also, of course, have a member list of the Elder Justice Coordinating Council. As Bob had recommended, I think we're always trying to think strategically about other federal partners that may need to be a part of this conversation, and given how pervasive and how widespread this issue is, I would probably say it touches most every federal agency, but we also, again, are looking for any recommendations you might have on any other member agencies that we could potentially invite to be a part of the Elder Justice Coordinating Council. And then again, you have the bios as well, and the written testimonies, and then any PowerPoints that the presenters, both the ones that just presented in the upcoming group, have made. So you have all of that at your disposal, and certainly if you have any questions, myself or any member of my team stands ready to help you as we continue and advance this conversation. Okay, so now we are going to pivot, and we're going to actually have agency reports. So I'm sure that as your working group member prepped you to do, hopefully, you're aware that we have allocated roughly 5 to 7 minutes for each agency. The order is based on who I love the most. No, I'm just kidding. That's not true. But again, you'll see on your agenda who we have sort of slated and in what order. Obviously, what we would love to do is just have you give an overview from your respective agency on kind of what's been happening lately in this particular space, so around elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation. Again, many of you have very active work group members, so for some of us it's not new news, but certainly for those that are watching and listening, that may be very good and timely information for them. I know for me, I always find I leave here charged because it's a reinforcement of really, I think, how effectively we are all trying to work together. It demonstrates our continued coordination across the federal government, which is the task of the Elder Justice Coordinating Council. So again, I would ask as a reminder that you speak into your mic so we make sure we have good sound quality. So with that then, we are going to start with our friends from the Department of Justice. And of course, many of you know Antoinette or Tony Bacon, who has been an active member the whole time we've been here as part of this administration. So Tony, thanks for your ongoing leadership and the great work that is happening over at the Department of Justice. And with that, ma'am, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Lance, and thanks especially for your leadership on these very important elder justice issues. Attorney General Barr has named elder justice as one of the Department of Justice's top priorities. And following the Attorney General's lead, our team at the Justice Department is doing more than ever to empower America's seniors and to combat elder fraud and abuse. Here are just a few examples. First, we're prosecuting more cases. From our 2018 Elder Justice Report to the 2019 Elder Justice Report, we increased prosecutions from 281 to 428. That's a 50% increase. Second, knowing that the best offense is a good defense, we've ramped up our outreach and education efforts and events, more than tripling the number of events from 196 to 603 from the 2018 to 2019 reporting years. Our education efforts and events reach seniors and elder justice professionals, amongst others. But importantly, we continue to conduct internal training for our prosecutors and federal agents. In fact, just a couple weeks ago, our elder justice coordinators gathered at our National Training Center where they shared best practices for investigating elder abuse cases and for conducting effective outreach and training. Third, the department is continuing to increase resources devoted to combating transnational criminal organizations that are targeting America's seniors through telemarketing fraud. In June, Attorney General Barr announced the creation of a transnational elder fraud strike force specifically designed to focus on cartels that are preying on our nation's seniors. I anticipate that the Department of Justice will have an announcement tomorrow on this effort. Fourth, the department is continuing to pursue nursing homes and skilled nursing facilities that are providing grossly substandard care, including those care providers that are stealing opioids, which is leaving seniors in immense pain, or providing medically unnecessary drugs that are essentially acting as chemical restraints. Fifth, the department is increasing its library of free resources to help state and local law enforcement investigate and prosecute elder fraud and abuse cases, and importantly, to help families find resources in their communities to support their senior friends and families. Sixth, the department is continuing to fund innovative programs to assist victims of elder abuse and financial exploitation, and expanding partnerships and working more closely than ever with state attorney general's offices, private sector partners, and of course, our colleagues on this coordinating council. by leveraging our strengths and combining our resources, we can truly maximize our impact. We look forward at the Justice Department to a productive 2020 and will continue to work tirelessly to investigate and prosecute those who prey on America's seniors. Thanks to each and every one of you for your partnership and for your commitment to this important initiative.
All right, Tony, thank you so much. Again, I'm just excited to hear about some of those benchmarks, what you guys are doing under the Attorney General's leadership in terms of prosecuting more cases. That's phenomenally critical since you are that law enforcement arm of the work that we do. Certainly the outreach and education, the transnational work, you're the only group that really probably can focus so exclusively on that. So we're excited to hear about your announcement later this week. All right.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow?
Stay
Good
tuned.
stuff. All right, great, great. And then, of course, the resources. How do we make sure that folks in communities are empowered and know where to go and what to do and who's a resource to them? So, again, thanks to the Attorney General, thanks to you for your leadership, and we appreciate the work happening at DOJ. Any council questions for DOJ? Show of hands if so. Okay, seeing none, thank you again, Tony. Appreciate your great report. Okay, we want to turn now to our colleagues over at the Securities and Exchange Commission representing the SEC today. Is Mr. Roseman. To my left, you'll see here who is a commissioner over at SEC. Sir, we're so glad to have you as part of the conversation today. Thank you for your time. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm truly happy to join you here today at the fall 2019 meeting of the EJCC. I want to thank Secretary Azar, Secretary Robertson, Coordinator Bacon, and the administration for community living for once again bringing the EJCC together to discuss our shared goal of protecting elder Americans. Thank you also to the EJCC members, participants, and presenters here today for their critical roles in furthering this effort. Before I say more, let me note that the views I express today are my own and do not necessarily reflect the views of the United States Securities and Exchange Commission or my fellow commissioners. It's the standard disclaimer we always have to give. So, investor protection is a central tenet to the SEC's mission, and it's an objective that factors into every decision I make as a commissioner. With respect to America's older investors, the need for protection is indeed a priority for me. I see far too many enforcement matters involving elder adults who have been either victims or targets of fraud. But these stories are not confined to my work in government. Close friends and family have been targeted. The issue is personal, and not just for me. I've spoken to many people about this topic and have yet to meet someone who does not have a family member or person in their lives who is not a victim or target of elder fraud. We all know that these crimes may take place instantaneously, but can have financial, emotional, and psychological effects that devastate victims for far, far longer. I commend SEC Chairman Jay Clayton for his efforts to spotlight this issue and encourage the agency's work to combat fraud on older investors. Every division and office of the agency participates in this work. I'd like to highlight a few examples. The SEC staff engages in various programs with experts from within the agency and outside, including through this forum. Through these initiatives, we are able to better understand the prevalence, tactics, and targets of these types of fraud and understand what more can we do. A recent example is the SEC's roundtable on combating elder investor fraud organized by our Retail Strategy Task Force. Much like this meeting today, the roundtable gathered regulators and other experts from various other agencies and organizations for a full-day, interactive discussion of the types of fraudulent and manipulative schemes currently targeting elder investors. The conversation explored views on potential steps that regulators, regulated entities such as broker-dealers and investment advisors, as well as others, can take to identify and combat elder investor fraud. We at the SEC also have an Office of Investor Education and Advocacy, which regularly issues public alerts and bulletins to highlight problems and questions investors may encounter. Many of these materials specifically focus on informing and aiding elder investors. The SEC's Office of Investor Advocate has also published reports on elder financial exploitation and how the SEC works to protect such investors. The staff of the SEC's Office of Compliance, Inspections, and Examinations searches for signs of fraudulent schemes perpetrated through brokerage and advisory accounts. This not only helps early enforcement action, it also informs the agency about ways our registrants are handling such situations, including where diminished capacity may affect customer decision-making. the SEC's Division of Enforcement leads our efforts to punish those who mistakenly think they can get away with wrongdoing. Just last week, we announced that we filed an emergency action and obtained an asset freeze against the operators of a South Florida-based investment scheme that defrauded over 100 retail investors, many of whom are seniors. Unfortunately, this is only the latest of such cases I've seen at the Commission. But I'm truly, truly proud of the agency's enforcement staff, who not only have the sense of urgency to act quickly in these matters, but are constantly improving their ability to detect such schemes as early as possible. Lastly, many SEC employees volunteer and conduct outreach in other communities and at events to educate folks about potential frauds, as well as to become a name and a face that investors can call. Our staff in our regional offices across the country are very active in these efforts, and I commend them for their passion. I'll close by noting that it is only through collaborations like today that we can realize our full collective potential to protect elder Americans from fraud. In this regard, many of the SEC's efforts dovetail or are done in conjunction with those of state and federal regulators and agencies. We serve as partners with each other in this fight, and I'm happy to see several of you here today. I look forward to opportunities for enhanced cooperation and support in the future, and I truly mean this. Come to us with ideas for what you think could best help our mission. Thank you again.
All right, thank you so much. I really, again, can't express to you how grateful I am for the work of the SEC. What you do is complex and something I still am wrapping my mind around in some respects. I do want to say last year, I think we're very pleased that Chairman Clayton was part of our EJCC meeting and really reinforced the commitment that the SEC has to this particular issue. So again, so grateful that that you guys remain so vigilant and committed to helping prevent elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation. So do I have any questions for our distinguished colleague from the SEC from any members of the council? I will ask that after every speaker, so you might just go ahead and be ready for that. All right. Any show of hands? No questions? All right, sir. Thank you again so much, and please pass on our thanks to Chairman Clayton for his continued support. And we've had a couple meetings over at your space. You guys have nice space over there too.
Fortunate.
Yeah, I love that. All right, so wonderful. Thank you very much. Now we're going to reverse table again and go over to the other side of the podium and hear from Gary Barksdale, who is the Chief Inspector from the U.S. Postal Inspector's Office. And Gary has been with us a couple of different times. So again, we're glad to have you back, Gary. Thank you so much for your time, the information you plan to share. And with that, sir, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. So good morning, Assistant Secretary Robertson, members of the council, and our guest here today. As he said, my name is Gary Barksdale. I'm the Chief Postal Inspector for the United States Postal Inspection Service, and I'm pleased to be here with you today to discuss a few of the initiatives that the Postal Inspection Service has in progress. First, as Attorney Bacon described, her early announcement of the Department of Justice recently formed Transnational Elder Fraud Strike Force. I'm very pleased to announce that the Inspection Service will be founding members of the Strike Force. Our investigative resources are focused on mass mailing frauds, tech support scams, and international lottery scams. Second, in September of 2019 of this year, the Inspection Service conducted a money mural interdiction in the Eastern District of New York with primary focus on the New York City boroughs of Queens and Brooklyn. This initiative was conducted as part of the Inspection Service commitment to the Attorney General's and Department of Justice efforts to combat transnational elder fraud organizations. The goal was to identify witting and unwitting money mules, disrupt money mule activity, take enforcement action when possible, develop intelligence, and intercept victim funds, and identify victims for intervention. This initiative resulted in over 100 addresses being visited, 88 unlicensed money mule transmitter letters served, and 65 victims contacted. In addition, we were able to return over $22,000 to victims. Our agency and others this past fall joined international counterparts to find and stop persons who transmit funds from victims in North America and Europe and send them money to overseas fraud operations. Many who have been persuaded to commit this form of money laundering are our seniors. In my experience, most don't grasp the legal nature of what they're doing, but for those who do, we're pursuing what enforcement actions we can. The point is, we need to stop the flow of funds that fuel offshore criminal enterprises. Exerting pressure on the money transmitter themselves is an effective way to do that. I'm also pleased to report we now have a postal inspector permanently assigned abroad who works closely with the Jamaican authorities and, where possible, facilitates the extradition of lottery scammers to the U.S. to face our justice system. The inspection service is grateful for the investigative help we received from our partner agency, many of which are represented here today, and I look forward to the continued collaboration. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Chief Inspector Barksdale. Appreciate the good information and the great work that's happening over the Postal Service. We know, again, you're such a critical gateway to help preventing some of the fraud and scams that we see. And I know for most of us in the room, you know, it's not a Sunday without a call from my older relatives saying, "Hey, I got in the mail this opportunity to do," to which I say, "Do not." Right?
Right.
So again, appreciate you guys being that protector and the gateway where you can, and the prosecuting that you're doing, and the money return. That's excellent. Very good. Council members, you know what I'm going to ask. Any questions for Chief Inspector? Okay. All right. Thank you again, sir, for your remarks.
Thank you.
All right, now let's pivot and hear from the Social Security Administration. We have with us today Jeffrey Buckner, who is the Associate Commissioner for the Office of Strategic and Digital Communications. So I'm excited to hear what you have to share with us, sir, and thank you so much for being here. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to join you for my first EJCC,
All right.
continuing Social Security's commitment to our council's mission. Preventing and raising awareness of elder abuse is of great concern to us because so many of our beneficiaries are seniors. It's also a great concern that many seniors may become victims of a nationwide telephone impersonation scam. To help stop this abuse, in November last year, we launched a public awareness campaign together with our Office of the Inspector General to raise awareness about fraudulent phone calls claiming to be from Social Security employees or others otherwise claiming to have a problem with someone's Social Security number or account. We've taken several important and significant steps to raise awareness and prevent scammers from harming our most vulnerable citizens. As a first line of defense, we collaborated with major telephone companies to implement what's called a do not originate process for our toll-free numbers. This process permits telephone companies to terminate spoofing calls across their networks attempting to be any of our toll-free numbers. As of mid-September, all of our published toll-free numbers are now on the DNO list. And one major carrier reports it's actually blocking 98.5% of all incoming calls to their wired and wireless customers, regardless of the carrier on which the call originates, for our toll-free numbers. We've also updated our 1-800 number message for individuals who call with information about the scams so they don't have to wait any longer than necessary to speak to a representative. We've also added an extra security measure to our 800 number callback option. Callers who select this callback option are asked to state their name, which is recorded. When the caller receives the scheduled callback, they hear their recorded name in their own voice and assuring them that the call is legitimate. We've trained our frontline employees, those on the phone and in our offices, to handle public inquiries about phone scams. And just this November 18th, our IG released a new online form for the public to report phone scams. And this is separate from our other online form for people to report program fraud. This new form will help our Office of the Inspector General analyze data for trends and commonalities to decide what they can pursue. We've also expanded and continue our awareness of the scams as part of our public outreach, including non-online methods to help reach more seniors. We released TV and radio public service announcements, reaching potential audiences of over 260 million TV viewers and over 380,000 radio listeners. We've published over 200 articles about phone scams and fraud throughout local media outlets, reaching almost 200 million people. And we've collaborated with our Inspector General's office to add scam messages to over 2,100 Walmart stores nationwide. We also, knowing that so many seniors still choose to visit our field offices, we're also displaying similar information in all of our offices around the country to help seniors see this message. We've also conducted 400 presentations this year throughout the country at senior and community centers, large hospitals, with advocacy groups and employers and tribal communities. And we conduct regular centenarian visits. Our message is simple. If you see someone who receives a questionable call, if you receive a questionable call from someone from Social Security, hang up. Don't share personal information or payment, and use our online form to report the call. One last item I'd like to share is that so many of our seniors depend on others to be their representative payee to manage their Social Security benefits. About 8 million Social Security beneficiaries have a representative payee, and they manage approximately $70 billion in benefits. While the vast majority of these payees manage their funds properly, the threat of payee misuse remains an issue, requiring close monitoring and oversight. Recent changes in the law will allow us to better combat fraud. One example is advanced designation of representative payee. This will allow beneficiaries or applicants the option to designate individuals in order of priority to serve as their representative payee and make that decision before they may need such an option. Beneficiaries and applicants would be able to update or change this advanced designee order of priority at any time. As we implement these important changes, our foremost goal is to prevent elder abuse, expose and help prevent fraud, and educate the public through our outreach efforts. We continue to work with the council to stop fraud and abuse, and we invite others to help reach out to coordinate these activities. I have a challenge for all the council members. Reach out to me. Ask how you can help us spread the word about phone scams and other forms of elder abuse. We look forward to continuing our partnerships with you and building new ones. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Buckner. Really appreciate that update from SSA. As you mentioned, you're such a vital member of the Elder Justice Coordinating Council, given your beneficiary group. And again, we're just grateful you're here, grateful for the ongoing things that you guys are doing. Do I have any questions for SSA from members of the council? Nobody wants to know which carrier blocked 98.5% of all. Nobody wants to know that? I'm like, I need to see where mine's at. I don't know where mine would be ranked, but thank you, sir. I do have a question, or actually a comment more than anything else. So as the council members know, this has been 2019 has been the year of listening for the Elder Justice Coordinating Council. We've had nearly, I can't see Hillary because of how blinding the lights are to all of us, but I want to say it's roughly a dozen different listening sessions across the country. While a lot of the feedback is being synthesized now and will be available, I know, for the ones I participated in, I tell you, the rep payee issue is big. So many people have commented about that, either personal experiences or things that they're aware of that they wanted us to know about. So again, I'm just grateful that you brought that up, because that was going to be something I was hoping the SSA might address, and certainly lots of work we can continue to do in that critical space.
Agreed. Thank you.
So thank you. Do you have a question down here? Yes, sir.
Yes, I'm just wondering if those carriers are aware of other, like the IRS imposter scams that it might know. Do they also block those numbers? Because we've seen a number of government imposter scams from a variety of agencies. Are you happen to be aware of their awareness of any of the other scams?
I'm not aware if they have their own DNO process for them as well.
Yeah, but an opportunity, so thank you for that. And again, we've already heard from pretty much every speaker that if you have other thoughts or collaborative ideas, let's connect, and I think that's so important. I do know that, again, at the working group level, we're all very honored to have some phenomenal professionals who engage in these conversations much more regularly. So I always make notes, and I go back and I visit with the team to see kind of where we're we're checking the box and where we may need to check the box. So again, thank you very much for the comments from SSA, sir. Okay, we're going to now hear from the Department of Veterans Affairs. And again, we all know just how critical the VA is to the council, and as a veteran myself, how much we all believe that veterans should be protected from abuse, neglect, and exploitation. So with us today from the VA is Ron Burke, who is the Executive Director of the Pension and Fiduciary Service Group at the VA. Mr. Burke, we're so glad to have you here today. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you. On behalf of Secretary Wilkie, I would like to thank Assistant Secretary Lance Robertson for convening and leading this meeting today, and the continued allowance for the Department of Veterans Affairs to participate as a member of this important council. Sir, I'd also like to thank you for your service.
Thank you, sir.
I'm honored to represent VA in today's discussions and look forward to the continued cooperation with other federal agencies in protecting individuals against abuse, neglect, and fraud. VA serves many veterans and beneficiaries across many programs. By the conclusion of fiscal year 2018, the Veterans Health Administration served 9.17 million enrollees and serves as our first line of defense for neglect, abuse, and fraud prevention. VHA takes various actions to ensure the best protection for veterans and beneficiaries, which include the following: GeriFit, which is a geriatric fitness program providing physical activity therapy to elderly rural veterans using telehealth technology. Geriatric Scholars Program, which addresses the shortages of specialized geriatric skills and knowledge in rural VA clinical settings by training VA general clinicians in the treatment of older rural veterans. And the Geriatric Research Education and Clinical Center Connect program, which trains VA providers to manage medically complex cases through case-based conferences, electronic consultations, virtual meetings, and clinical video telehealth. VA also serves veterans and beneficiaries by providing benefit payments for disabilities, educational assistance, and provides guarantees of home loans under the umbrella of the Veterans Benefits Administration. VBA served 9.7 million veterans and beneficiaries at the midpoint of fiscal year 2019. VBA takes a multi-level approach to protecting veterans and beneficiaries from abuse, neglect, and fraud. In the Pension and Fiduciary Service Program, we recently updated procedures to take a more proactive approach in the annual accounting process. The requirement to account annually is one of VA's defenses against the financial exploitation of the vulnerable population served and leads to the most allegations of misuse. Therefore, we shortened the removal and replacement process of a potentially misusing fiduciary from 120 days down to 54 days. Also, we're developing a portal to allow for the electronic submission of annual accountings, which will potentially reduce insufficient responses and allow for an even more reduced period for appropriate submission of accountings. The long-term goal is to integrate an analysis feature to assist in further detecting irregularities in annual accountings that could signify financial exploitation. In our pension arena, we're developing a referral process and procedures to direct VA beneficiaries to the Federal Trade Commission and to publicize the referral process to the VA beneficiaries regarding financial scams. Data collection will be executed utilizing the existing FTC Consumer Sentinel complaint databases. By providing a link to this database on the va.gov website for veterans or other beneficiaries, the submitted information will provide the VA's OIG access to the data on potential exploitation for review and in support of investigations. VBA is placing additional warnings on numerous forms regarding applicable fees that may be charged. Pension Service is updating its guidance to clarify the definition of questionable medical expenses, as well as providing examples in our guidance. Further, VBA is reviewing its processes to determine the most efficient and cost-effective means of verifying direct deposit information provided by claimants on their applications to ensure it is for the appropriate party. VA loan guarantee refers to deceptive communications related to mortgage advertisements to the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau for warnings and enforcement. A number of these deceptive advertisements feature senior citizens. To counteract some unscrupulous mortgage lenders regarding refinancing and cash-out home loans, VA finalized regulations that require more information provided upfront to those borrowing funds to ensure an informed decision can be made. For example, some instances require a net tangible benefit test, which compares the proposed new loan and the current loan at two separate stages of the loan process. Additionally, under Title 38, Chapter 21, the Specially Adapted Housing Program administers home modification projects as required for independent living program participants in the Vocational Rehabilitation and Employment Program. Improving awareness and prevention, home modifications may result in a decrease in elder abuse as it supports independent living that accommodates the individual's specific needs. VA is further interested in potential collaboration with, to name a few, the Consumer Financial Protection Board for possible review of financial privacy regulations and potential for updates in cases where a third party is managing someone's funds. Additionally, a partnership with HHS regarding potential training on VA beneficiaries and actions they can take to stop or even prevent financial exploitation of veterans and beneficiaries. We must work together to improve the reporting of abuse, the collection and sharing of data, and VA stands ready to improve our collaboration with all partners. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Burke. And again, at HHS, we absolutely are thrilled with the partnership that we have with the VA. We consider that to be a priority. It's critical. And I know even at the Administration for Community Living, we're just very excited about recent conversations of furthering how we support veterans in their community for the services and the care that they need. Any questions from the council for Mr. Burke? Okay. I do know Secretary Wilkie, again, just what a champion and a great leader for your agency. We had worked with his predecessor as well, and just very pleased that you guys are remaining so involved with the EJCC, and thanks for the great work that you do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Okay. We have up next a good friend from the Corporation for National and Community Service, Mr. Deborah Cox-Rao, who serves as the Director of Senior Corps and has likewise been engaged, I think, from the beginning of the EJCC for our administration, and just grateful for the leadership that she provides. And she is a big Buckeye fan. We love her anyway. And we're just so glad for the great things that are happening over at CNCS. And having had some familiarity with CNCS prior to taking on this role, it's just really been an expansion of my knowledge of the work that you guys do, and particularly the impact that you guys can have around elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation. So just so delighted for what you guys are doing each and every day, and we're thankful that you're here. Glad to hear your report. And with that, ma'am, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lance, and thank you for allowing me this time to briefly discuss some of the elder justice activities that occurred among CNCS and senior projects this past year. But before I continue, I would also like to thank Bob Blancato for recognizing our work and the $27 million investment that National Service has placed in the opioid space in 2019. Senior Corps, with over 1,100 grantees and 200,000 volunteers, have projects that are engaged in a myriad of activities that support elder justice. I would like this morning to just share a few of those examples with you. Our projects place volunteers with local sheriffs, police, and law enforcement to help combat and mitigate abuse in all of its forms, especially by conducting safety and wellness checks. Our volunteers serve as part of the elder abuse prevention teams and coalitions to help develop local strategies and policies around elder fraud and abuse. Our volunteers are working with Adult Protective Services and organizing education efforts on detection of fraud and abuse against seniors. Our grantees are supporting Medicare fraud efforts, as this fraud often leads to identity theft, as we all know, and are placing volunteers on ombudsmen to serve as spot checkers, visiting nursing home residents to help ensure their safety. You know, a couple of our projects even got creative this year, and they developed a local theater group to travel and conduct plays about scams and frauds, after which time they have open dialogues with the audience. As a Senior Corps Director, I know I'm proud of my projects as they continue to find new ways to support elder justice issues about which they also feel passionately. And their passion is what helped us to continue the work that we contributed over the past year. First, we've been working with the staff at the Department of Justice, who last March invited us to participate during the national announcement of their largest sweep involving technical support scams. During that announcement, DOJ noted the public education outreach efforts conducted by Senior Corps is helping to prevent further victimization by educating seniors and others in their communities on elder fraud. Then, we also participated in the Department of Justice Local Leaders Forum and Roundtable with Attorney General Barr. This roundtable included one of our RSVP volunteers who serves in the Connecticut Attorney General's office, helping to research and mitigate elder justice complaints. You know, this is an initiative, and I'm looking at Tony, I would like to see replicated across the United States, and I hope the DOJ will assist us in spreading the word about the value that RSVP volunteers could bring to the offices of Attorney General in all states. Each month, I publish a director's notes, which is distributed to all of our grantees and stakeholders across the country. These notes include an Elder Justice Corner that helps to keep our projects informed by spotlighting the various new frauds and scams. Information that we receive from SSA, CFPB, the DOJ, United States Postal Service, and other federal agencies on this council. I thank all of you for continuing to share these stories with us. Our local projects began connecting with their local elder justice coordinators and are using the issues provided in these director's notes to host joint local education events. This past summer, we conducted 3 convenings that were issue-based, with all the workshops focused on a single issue. One of these workshops focused on elder justice. We drew from the expertise of agencies on this council and others to help inform our grantees the most up-to-date knowledge and solutions to help solve some of the issues surrounding financial and other types of fraud. Again, I would like to thank Lance, Tony, Bob, and also the staff of these agencies on this council who either spoke at one of our plenaries, conducted workshops, or staffed an exhibit. Senior Corps is fortunate to have such great collaborators of those of you in this room. We continue to host Tuesday Talks, which are webinars on this issue. Most recently, we had staff from the National Center on Elder Abuse who discussed supports and tools for elder abuse prevention. And during all this, we managed to plan 2 grant competitions for which elder justice was a funding priority, one for our SVP programs and one for our senior companion programs. We are currently working with the Department of Justice to develop a collaborative pilot program that involves Senior Corps grantees working with their local adult protective services on some of the complaints that APS receives. So, you know, I think we've had quite the busy year, and we continue to keep elder justice issues at the top of our mind for our grantees. But I ask in that vein, as we're keeping this issue top of our mind for our grantees, I hope that the agencies in this room and our friends online will keep Senior Corps top of mind. Whether you need support in helping older Americans to protect themselves against fraud and abuse, or if you need support in helping to mitigate the circumstances of their having been victims, we are here to help. Please keep Senior Corps in mind, knowing that we can help increase the capacity of your program and your initiatives. We sat here today on this council, and it's honored to serve, to assist in addressing this critical issue of elder fraud and abuse, and to support elder justice. Senior Corps is committed to the important task of protecting older Americans. Thank you.
Deb, thanks so much. Again, appreciate the great work that's happening at Senior Corps and as part of the larger CNCS effort. Your local level presence, again, I think is unmatched, and we just thank you for what volunteers are doing across our great country each and every day. Do we have any council questions then for CNCS? No questions. All right. Well, I'm very familiar with what you guys are doing, Deb, so I'll hold my questions.
You noticed I didn't talk about the game, right?
Yeah, that's true. You did not. Very good. Okay, so with that then, Deb, thanks for your remarks. I want to go ahead and actually pivot a bit because we have presenting today, instead of 14, we have 12 agencies, so we actually, or 14, yeah, so we actually, I think, are going to, if my distinguished friend from HUD doesn't mind going first for the next presentation, then what we'll do is we'll go ahead and cluster the next group of 6 agencies that are presenting together so that we'll have kind of more of an even balance. And now what we'll do is we'll pivot to the panel with Scott and Hillary. So I'd like to ask Scott and Hillary to make their way forward. And also as chairman, I'd like to go ahead and give us just a couple minutes to stretch. So if you guys would like to stand up for a little bit, we have another hour and a half ahaid of us. So if you want to shake, don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere. shake each other's hands, please, and just welcome each other and say hello. Then we'll have Hillary and Scott start here in just a couple of minutes.
Is there a spot here? You might be able to sit right there. Lance, is that seat open?
It's Tony.
That's Tony. Okay, all right.
Just stand close to you.
Yeah.
So HUD is not a female. HUD is a gentleman.
Oh. Yeah.
So it is.
Are you asking?
Yeah, I'm asking. So this is the right person, but we'll pronounce it as.
Yeah, I think we better check with, yeah, you sure it's a male?
Yeah, he's right down here.
Okay, dressed in a suit.
Don't fall, please.
We need you, you can't fall. It's probably A. Do you want me to go ask?
Will his
I can
name
ask.
be up here? So if his name is correct, then we should be okay. Then I'll figure out that's her name.
Graceman. Boy, these light takes some getting used to.
Yeah, you really can't see anybody, so I keep kind of looking out for some feedback from you guys, but I can't see it, so.
Right.
I'm gonna just make sure I pronounce his name correctly.
Yeah, that would probably be the best idea, but I'm gonna guess it's Ellie, but.
Buckeyes are rocking me, I'm telling you. I think they're the best team in the country.
Going to Indy on Saturday.
Are you?
I made my reservation.
All right, we're going to get back underway. If everybody would please take their seats.
Ready?
Okay, so a correction to what I said earlier, council members will actually have, when we go back to agency reports, we'll have 5 agency reports. So 6 the first go-around, which you just completed. We'll do 5 the next round, so that creates some balance. We are now, though, going to transition and take a bit of a break because we want to hear about what's happening around the reporting system that's already been acknowledged several times now this morning. It's the National Adult Maltreatment Reporting System, or NAMERS, which we house here at the Administration for Community Living at HHS. So we've allocated about 20 minutes or so to give the council members kind of an update. Certainly, if you have any questions, these colleagues are available during this time slot, but also anytime you or a member of your working group may have a question, please do let us know because this is critical. And with us today to present are a couple of outstanding colleagues. Hillary, who really oversees this entire effort, grateful for her leadership. She serves as a director of ACL's Office of Elder Justice and Adult Protective Services. I think most of you know that we are very fortunate at HHS within ACL to have the APS program. As an entity, we provide some funding to. We wish we could provide more, but Hillary's team certainly leads that. And joining her is our Chief Information Officer, our CIO at ACL, Scott Corey. And both of them, again, are going to just provide kind of a quick overview of what's happening with NAMERS. Then I'll open it up to the council for any questions that they may have. So with that, Hillary and Scott, thank you so much for being here today. Look forward to hearing from you. Oh, before we do, I'd like to acknowledge Carl. You had mentioned Carl's here somewhere. Carl, thank you again for being here, sir. All right, so Hillary and Scott, floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Lance, and thank you, members of the Elder Justice Coordinating Council. Good morning, and good morning to everybody who is here in person and who is joining us through the live stream. We're so glad that you're with us this morning. Today, in fact, as we speak, we are releasing the 2018 NAMERS report. NAMERS stands for the National Adult Maltreatment Reporting System, NAMERS. The report is being released right now. It is up on our acl.gov website. EJCC members, you will be receiving your own copy of it before the end of the day electronically. And if you would like a hard copy of it, please let us know and we will deliver it to you as well. For everybody in the audience, you can now go to acl.gov and see that report. And with the release of this report, it is the third annual report of data that we have released. We thought that this would be an opportune moment to revisit with the Elder Justice Coordinating Council where we've come from, where we are, and where we think that we can go together with all of you with NAMERS. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to review some background. And then most importantly, my colleague Scott will walk us through looking ahead to the potential these data hold for further elder justice coordinating across the entire federal government. So, why was NAMERS created? Well, I think probably everybody up here and everybody in the audience is aware that historically, data on elder abuse, neglect, and financial exploitation has been lacking. We know that in the past, the Government Accountability Office, Congress, in enacting the Elder Justice Act, colleagues led by Department of Justice in creating the Elder Justice Roadmap, and many others had pointed to a need for data-driven evidence on abuse, neglect, and exploitation of older adults and adults with disabilities. And that is what NAMERS does. So, NAMERS is the result of an extraordinary effort of states and territories, of adult protective services leaders and staff all over the country, and of my colleagues at ACL and across the federal government. It is the first ever data reporting on adult maltreatment that has been investigated and or substantiated by adult protective services. It's really important to keep in mind that participation in NAMERS is entirely voluntary. We don't require any state or territory to collect and submit their data to us. We can't, we have no authority. There is such enthusiasm for data and for evidence that, in fact, every state and every territory that is eligible, 56 entities participate voluntarily in NAMERS. So what is it that they are collecting, reporting, and submitting? There are three components. The first is called administrative. This is agency data. It contains information about key staff, about adult protective services policies, population served, and that does differ by state, so it's very important, and the source of the data that they are submitting. So it is a repository of information about what adult protective services looks like across this nation. The second component contains summary statistics. We call them key indicators. 20 states and territories are reporting key indicators. These are aggregated data of the number of closed or completed investigations, the number of clients for whom abuse has been alleged, in other words, that they are alleged to be experiencing abuse, and the number of victims. These are individuals for whom the experience of abuse has been substantiated. These data are collected and reported by demographics, by disability, by health status, and by outcomes of the investigation. There is also some data in there about alleged perpetrators. The most detailed component is, of course, the case level. These are de-identified data at the level of the investigation, number of clients, number of maltreatment types, because again, we all know that it is likely if an individual is experiencing one kind of maltreatment, they are probably experiencing a variety of different forms of maltreatment, and the number of perpetrators in each investigation. So this is very detailed case level data. I'm very, very proud to report that in 2018, we have 31 states and territories reporting in the case component, case level data. Again, that's extraordinary. And that shows, let's see, which one? That NAMERS is evolving and the data quantity and quality is improving. We're now in 2019. This is the fourth year of data reporting. Again, today we are releasing last year's data. We need to look at the data, of course, and that's what Carl and his amazing colleagues at the APS Technical Assistance Resource Center do. They look at the data, they clean it up, they make sure that it's accurate and valid before it gets released. That's why we're releasing 2018 data today, but 2019 data is being collected by all states and territories, all 56 of those entities. And what we see from this slide is that the more states are reporting in the case level component, and that we have, as of 2018, we have every state and territory eligible to reporting. 5 in 2018 are reporting in the administrative component. 20 are reporting in the key indicators component, and again, 31 in the case component. Thank you, Scott. So these data reflect a combination of key indicator and case component data. And it shows, again, the growing commitment and the capabilities of states and territories to report their data into NAMERS. So, as an example, in 2016, we were able to show that we had a little over 600,000 individuals alleged to have experienced abuse. By 2018, what you'll see in the report when you look at what we released today, it's above 700,000. A very important note here, we cannot draw conclusions on the incidence of elder abuse. We can only see from NAMERS data what APS sees and what APS reports on. As Scott tells me all the time, NAMERS The data in NAMERS is aspirational. We are always looking to improve, enhance, increase the data elements, and Scott will, I know, talk a lot more about that because he always does. But I wanted to put that caveat in there because it's an important one. Okay, next slide, types of abuse. So again, these are data from the 31 states reporting in the case level component. A couple of highlights here. Financial exploitation is the highest single category of abuse type. Not sure that that's a surprise to anyone. Overall, you'll see in the report, 25% of investigations were substantiated, with the highest case type substantiated being self-neglect. We could spend the next 5 or 6 months without a break talking about self-neglect. I promise you we will not do that here. But if you would like to talk about that, we talk about that a lot among ourselves within the Elder Justice Coordinating Council. 42% of self-neglect allegations were investigated, and the investigation substantiated the allegation. Next slide. Recurrence, this really refers to data on those individuals who are alleged to have experienced abuse, who were the subject of a previous APS report. So it is showing not exactly recurrence, but individuals whose situations, sadly, were not totally solved for the first time around, and here they are back again. And so that's what these data show. And finally, we have a histogram that breaks down the percentage of the total number of individuals for whom there was a substantiation of the experience of abuse by age. And you can see that it sort of goes, the percentage of individuals is higher in the higher age range. I again want to note here, because I'm sure that many of you are wondering, we can't break down perpetrators in this same way for various reasons related to allegations of perpetration and also of the low numbers that we have at this time. Again, we are aspirational. We are looking to improve. And with that background, now comes the important part, which is Scott talking about what we're doing with these data, what we want to do with these data, and most importantly, what everybody up here, all of the member departments of the Elder Justice Coordinating Council can do with these data and by sharing data among our respective departments. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Hillary.
Thank you, Hillary. So we pivot a little bit into what we've seen and what we're now going to talk about what we've done and what we will be doing. So NAMERS data has already been used by ACL to do two things. One is to satisfy requirements of the Elder Abuse Prevention and Prosecution Act. We've shared data with the Department of Justice from NAMERS, working with them to provide data that will help them associate our allegations and substantiations of elder abuse with investigation and prosecution data that they maintain on elder abuse. So first box checked. The second, which is really important for the practice of adult protective services, is that the NAMERS data has been used to undertake the first national evaluation of adult protective services. This was conducted by our Adult Protective Services Technical Assistance Resource Center. The work is currently in progress. The reports haven't yet been published, but it's been an incredibly important assistance for our partners at the state and local level providing services to help mitigate elder abuse. There are future opportunities for NAMERS data that Hillary alluded to. Now that we have 3 years of data, albeit with some gaps because of the nature of the way we've collected the data, we have the opportunity to start doing research based on evidence into ways of looking at elder abuse that we haven't previously been able to do. ACL is in the process of convening a project. We call it the Elder Abuse Predictive Analytics Project, which is bringing together technical experts from across the government, from academia, from other partners, to be able to take a look at our NAMERS data, look at other data sets, including data sets from CMS on the payment and engagement, and possibly other data sets, including law enforcement data. And we're basically throwing the data into a data lake, and then using tools like artificial intelligence and machine learning to look for patterns. We think this won't be conclusive, but it will help us start to understand the art of the possible with NAMERS data. Looking ahead, we recognize that the NAMERS data is the seed. Essentially, it's like a seed crystal. If you throw a crystal, I'm an academic at heart, if you throw a crystal into saturated solution, all of a sudden, everything starts to crystallize. The NAMERS data, we believe, because of its nature, isn't the end of the work. It's the beginning. And by working with partners such as CFPB, SEC, FTC, and Treasury, we can use NAMERS data to associate our information with theirs and look at financial exploitation and the potential causes and potential impacts of financial exploitation. With the VA, we think that we can use NAMERS data to understand the experiences of veterans with maltreatment. With SSA, we believe that we can use their data and our data to potentially understand a clearer picture of the rates of abuse, neglect, and exploitation for individuals receiving Social Security and Social Security disability income. I brought it in right on time. So this is now people's opportunities for question. Lance, I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you for the opportunity to present this to the council and to the audience today.
Wonderful. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Hillary. Good. Nice, succinct, quick update on NAMERS, both what we know based on 3 years of data collection, fourth now in progress. Scott, again, I love this slide about the future opportunities. I think all of us as agency members are pretty excited about what we know data can help us do, particularly in terms of, like you said, the predictive analysis, use of AI, and how we can really help get in front of some of these repetitive abuses that maybe we can, as agencies, put programs or policies in place to help prevent or curb. Okay, so we do have time now for questions. If any council members have questions for Scott or Hillary, I'm sure they'd love to answer any questions you might have. Yes, sir.
Does the NAMERS data indicate where APS is getting their tip-off? What's the entry point for APS to get the case?
The answer is yes.
Okay, great.
And for folks in the audience and for council members who are interested, there's a complete set of the data elements that NAMERS collects on our website. So if you want to refer your staff to that, that would be a great place for them to start to understand.
Yeah, and the other thing is, in each report, including the 2018 report, there's an appendix that has all the definitions, so you can see exactly what it is that got reported and all of those details. I commend it to you.
Any other questions from council members? As Hillary indicated, I think the report now is online or will be online today at acl.gov. We would certainly ask that you go out on the web, grab that report, and really share it within your agency. Are there other key decision makers that may not be directly involved in the EJCC work, but who might also be in some way appreciative of the information that's being provided now? So thank you again, Scott and Hillary. We appreciate the work that you guys have been doing. And again, on behalf of the council, thanks for your time and the information shared today. Okay, council, now we're going to, again, jump back into that second set of agency reports. So this is my third attempt to give you an accurate number of how many agencies are going to report, because in the counting of 5, I failed to include myself, HHS. So HHS makes the 6th agency to report in this block. So with that, again, I'm grateful that HUD was willing to defer until after the NAMERS presentation to create better balance. So with us representing the Department of Housing and Urban Development is Ellie Greenbaum, who is a senior advisor over at HUD, and his first EJCC meeting but we are very glad to have you here and certainly very pleased to have HUD at the table. I know that Secretary Carson believes in doing what his agency can to help curb abuse, neglect, and exploitation, and so glad that you were here. We welcome your remarks, and with that, sir, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for having me, and thank you to all the members of the Coordinating Council as well. I'm eager to represent HUD this morning and update the Council on the work we've done to identify and stop abuse and exploitation specifically. HUD's committed to protecting the elderly from exploitation, abuse, and neglect through a number of programs and strategies, but I'd like to take some time today to actually update the Council on improvements we're making to one major program, our Home Equity Conversion Mortgage, or HECM program, which is our reverse mortgage program. As part of the department's larger efforts for housing finance reform, HUD continues to make changes to try and make the HECM program fiscally sustainable while ensuring the HECM product remains available for seniors wishing to age in place, and for whom other financial strategies are actually more costly. Just this year, we've made permanent a policy requiring HECM borrowers to provide a second appraisal where the first exceeds an estimate by a certain threshold. This change addresses the real threat of overappraised properties to our insurance fund, as recoveries by HUD on such properties may be limited. Requiring a second appraisal when first appraisals exceed a certain estimate of appraised value is a prudent first step at managing risk and allows us to continue offering HECMs to more senior borrowers. HUD has additionally proposed eliminating the HECM to HECM refinance product, which also presents a risk of overinflated property values. In our housing finance reform plan submitted to the President on September 5th in response to a presidential memorandum, we confirmed that HECM to HECM refis result in severely inflated appraisals. We also note that senior borrowers choose to refinance their HECMs when homes appreciate in value, creating a strong risk of adverse selection and exposing the insurance fund to properties with decreases in value. If HECM borrowers own properties that have appreciated in value and borrow against their gain, our insurance fund is left with less cushion against future claim for those properties that HUD is responsible for. HUD is also left with fewer funds for cross-subsidy to cover the claims of properties that decrease in value and presumably have not refinanced. With such excessive risk to the insurance fund, this limits HUD's ability to expand offering HECMs to other seniors looking to age in place. While there may be a benefit to an elderly homeowner choosing to refinance a HECM loan, particularly if that borrower needs to extract more equity from the property that has appreciated in value or to capture a lower interest rate, facts actually suggest otherwise. The equity available from house price appreciation may in fact be offset by the fees charged in originating those loans. So the refinance may not leave borrowers with more money in the end. Also, in an extended period with historically low interest rates, borrowers for whom refinance is appropriate would have had done so already, and the vast majority of HECMs in recent years are adjustable rate mortgages or ARM loans, so rates for those loans fall and rise automatically with the market. There's little reason for HECM borrowers to refinance to benefit from lower interest rates. HUD has some concern that elderly HECM borrowers are being pushed into refinancing soon after obtaining their original HECM. We are particularly troubled by the fact that many of these refinances are occurring with only a few years of the first loan being originated, which is something that is not typically beneficial to a borrower. The average age of our HECM borrower is around 73 years, and the median time to refinance is about 2 3/4 years. HUD is also aware that from reviewing copies of advertisements it has seen, that some seniors are solicited to refinance. By proposing elimination of the HECM to HECM refinance product, we aim to improve the fiscal safety and soundness of the HECM program and hope our elderly borrowers are better protected from potential exploitation. HUD also offers housing counseling to current and prospective FHA borrowers, and our Office of Housing Counseling supports a national network of nonprofit and government housing counseling agencies. Educating our elderly borrowers about making financial decisions and helping them make responsible homeownership choices is especially important since they are particularly at risk of exploitation. This past fiscal year, HUD has issued additional guidance aimed at expanding HECM default counseling by allowing HUD-approved housing counseling agencies to provide nationwide HECM default counseling. We're making it a priority to educate HECM borrowers and have also provided bonus awards in our fiscal year 2019 Notice of Funding Availability intended to expand HECM default counseling capacity. I'm happy to report that as of the third quarter of this fiscal year, a total of over 46,000 households received one-on-one counseling specifically for HECM from HUD-approved housing counseling agencies. Up through that same period, over 8,600 households received reverse mortgage counseling and obtained a HECM. HUD will continue reviewing its programs and make sure that they do not allow for exploitation of the elderly. We also look forward to working with the Council and other federal partners to ensure our efforts to protect our nation's elderly are better coordinated. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Greenbaum. Any questions for HUD? Mr. Greenbaum from council members. I appreciate you, sir, covering, again, both of the items of the reverse mortgage piece as well as the housing counseling. Both are critical, and as big believers in aging in place, we appreciate what that ultimately can do to help make sure older adults are able to remain in their community. I know at ACL we work pretty closely with HUD on how do we increase the portfolio of affordable housing for older adults, since in some markets housing costs are just so crazy. We're sitting in one where sometimes it's cheaper for an older adult to go move into a nursing home than to actually afford to live privately in the community. So again, we look forward to continued conversations with HUD, and thanks for what you're doing, and please pass on to Dr. Carson our gratitude on behalf of EJCC for his support.
Absolutely, thank you.
Okay, pivoting now from HUD, we are going to hear from CFPB, so let me jump to that. All right, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is represented today by Mr. Michael Herndon to my left, and Michael serves as the Deputy Assistant Director for the Office of Older Americans. So again, we're so glad to have CFPB's ongoing participation in the Elder Justice Council. So with that, sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lance. It's always enjoyable and productive to gather with colleagues from the federal agencies and others to work on these issues. I think we can all agree that collaboration at the local, state, and federal level is beneficial, if not actually essential, to all the work that we do. Today I'm going to share with you a few accomplishments since the last council meeting that add to the collective efforts at preventing and responding to elder financial exploitation. In July of this year, the office released an update to the CFPB advisory and recommendations for banks and credit unions on how to prevent, recognize, report, and respond to elder financial exploitation. This update focuses on recommendations 4 of the advisory regarding reporting of suspected elder financial exploitation by banks and credit unions to appropriate local, state, and federal first responders. It reiterates key recommendations from the 2016 advisory and recommendations regarding reporting, because many financial institutions remain unsure of whether to report suspected financial exploitation due to privacy concerns. In addition, this update provides new information on reporting based upon federal and state legislative changes. Another important area of the office's work where we have made progress centers around elder fraud prevention and response networks, those local efforts at preventing and responding to elder financial exploitation. These community-based networks vary in their composition and offer a wide range of activities, including community education, case review, and professional cross-training. Stakeholders typically include law enforcement, financial services providers, adult protective service, and another of other aging service providers. They also tend to include an array of other public and private organizations. Progress has been made in a number of networks. However, there are many more communities that could benefit from what they can achieve. After publishing a report and guide in 2017, the office began an initiative to help build new networks and to help strengthen existing ones by facilitating convenings for stakeholders. Since the last council meeting, the office has facilitated additional stakeholder convenings in New Hampshire, Vermont, Wisconsin, as well in Michigan, which we achieved in collaboration with the Department of Justice Office of Victims for Crime. In May, we released Convening Communities to Build Elder Fraud Prevention and Response Network, which summarizes findings from these earlier convenings that we held. These convenings help us understand what resources communities need to establish and sustain a network. The knowledge we've gained will inform our continued work in this area as we seek to expand its scope. According to recent Census Bureau efforts, by 2034, there will be more people 65 and older than 18 and younger for the first time in American history. So now is the time for communities to explore and create programs and the infrastructure to get ahead of this, the curve of this potential growth in elder financial abuse. Many of you have seen and used Money Smart for Older Adults, produced in collaboration with FDIC. In 2019, the American Society on Aging presented CFPB and FDIC an award, the Gloria Cavanaugh Award for Excellence in Training, for training older adults for our work in this fraud prevention tool. This award is presented to an individual or program that exemplifies continued excellence in training and education in the field of aging. In 2019, in August of 2019, we relaunched a dedicated section of our website to help older homeowners understand reverse mortgages. So it's good timing for the words before my previous speaker. This guide provides basics about reverse mortgages, understanding common issues, borrowers' rights, and a glossary of key terms. Along with the launch of the mortgage landing page, the Bureau updated its 20-plus page consumer-facing Q&A on reverse mortgages. In September 2019, the Bureau released a just-in-time resource, Your Reverse Mortgage After a Natural Disaster. This is where we align with FEMA and bringing them to the table. We worked with FEMA to create this guide. This is a one-of-a-type guide that helps reverse mortgage borrowers meet the requirements of their loan while recovering from a natural disaster. And it's great to hear all the points, because now there's another point that I have. We have something called Managing Someone Else's Money, which does contain a Social Security Representative Payee Guide. We relaunched an initiative with all of our Managing Someone Else's Money guides that now stakeholders can co-brand these. So we heard from a number of organizations that wanted to produce these guides, and we have now a way for them to co-brand them and distribute them themselves. These guides help millions of Americans with the fiduciary role that they've taken on managing money or property of a loved one who is unable to pay bills or make financial decisions. Another program that we have is placemats, and I hesitate to call them placemats sometimes, because once you hear about the number of organizations ordering them, they're obviously not being used as just for meals. This began in 2016. We began creating a series of these paper placemats with simple tools and tips and messaging for avoiding fraud. They're a very easy and simple way to engage with older consumers, to become aware of a variety of types of scams. While they were initially created to provide meal service providers with a fraud prevention tool, they've been useful in a wide variety of settings, including financial services, other government agencies, aging senior centers, a variety of places. So we realize this reiterates that the simple messages seems to appeal to a wide audience. Earlier this year, our office worked with colleagues at the Federal Trade Commission and the Social Security Administration to create a Social Security imposter placemat with tips on how to recognize, prevent, and report this type of scam. It is now even more commonly reported scam than the IRS imposter scam. And in just a few months since its release, we produced and released had ordered 300,000 of these placemats. So that's been a tremendous demand. So obviously the word about these types of scams is growing, and luckily we're able to do something about it. In closing, I just want to say working with our partners on the EJCC has strengthened our agency's initiatives to enhance the financial well-being of older people. Together, we have come up with new ideas for new projects and products and served as a sounding board to enhance our separate joint and combined work. And of course, I want to make sure you know where to find all this great work that we've done, and as always, visit us at consumerfinance.gov/olderamericans. And we look forward to our continued collaboration. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Herndon. CFPB has always been known for having great guides and resources, now placemats. So you guys, again, are just resource rich. So certainly those unfamiliar with CFPB to jump on your website and check out everything that's out there. So thanks for the great work that you guys do. Any questions for Mr. Herndon? Okay. Sir, again, thanks for your time and your remarks. Appreciate it. All right. Oh, We're to the FTC now. We're going to hear from Luis Greisman, who's been a part of the Elder Justice Council again for a number of meetings now, representing the Federal Trade Commission. She serves as Associate Director there, and always just real committed to the work that we do, and so grateful for what the FTC does in this particular space. So with that, the floor is yours, ma'am.
Thank you, Assistant Secretary Robertson. Thank you for your leadership and the work of the council. I'm also grateful for the ongoing collaboration with my colleagues up here on the council. Combating fraud against older adults is a top priority of the FTC. It's a priority of Chairman Simons and of each individual commissioner. And our work really goes along 3 avenues. One is law enforcement, 2 is data analysis, and the 3rd is education and outreach. And I want to touch just briefly upon each one. I think it's fair to say that every single case the FTC files involves some sort of scam or adverse impact involving older adults. But we do see particular types of scams target or disproportionately impact older adults. For example, we see business opportunity schemes that are targeting retirees, seeking to rob them of their hard-earned IRAs. We see other types of supplements pitched for treating Alzheimer's or for reducing dementia. And of course, robocalls, which have been mentioned more than once on this panel. We see robocalls pitching medical alert devices, robocalls impersonating the government, Social Security Administration, Medicare, the IRS. On any given month, the FTC receives between 400,000 and 500,000 complaints from consumers about robocalls. That is a significant number of consumer complaints or reports. On average, roughly 70% of them are about robocalls. The good news is that in addition to the sustained law enforcement by the FTC and others, there's constantly improvements on the technological front to minimize these unwanted calls. And the FTC's website has, I think, a very good consumer education on call blocking technologies that are available. I want to shift briefly to data analysis. The FTC recently issued its 2018 report on protecting older adults. And what we did in there is analyze our consumer sentinel data. There are many contributors to that data alongside me here. We received some 3 million reports directly from consumers or from other data contributors. Roughly half of them involve what we characterize as consumer fraud. And many consumers give us age information, which is totally voluntary. So we slice and dice the data, and I want to give you a couple of data points that we observed. Older adults are great at reporting fraud, and they are the least likely, and I want to underscore that, they are the least likely of any other age group to report losing money to fraud. But, and there's always a but, when they lose money, the median dollar loss for older adults is substantially higher than that for younger adults. So what's driving the significant median loss among older adults? We see it in 2 areas. While I'll lump together the prize promotion, sweepstakes, and lottery scams, or collectively the you've just won scam. Also family and friend imposter scams, which we're all familiar with, the grandparent scam, the call from the hospital saying your grandson, your granddaughter's been in a terrible accident. In order for the doctor to perform life-needed surgery, you have to wire transfer money. More broadly, though, as we look at our data, we see that the primary type of scam that older adults are losing money to versus those of younger adults involve what are called the tech support scams. They've already been alluded to. This is either the pop-up, the unsolicited telemarketing call, or the search engine result that leads you to an entity purporting to be Microsoft, Symantec, Dell, telling you your computer is infected and it will crash unless you allow this person remote access into it. Remote access is allowed. The person identifies all of these horrifying signals inside your computer, which are really, for the most part, benign. And some several $100s later, your computer you have paid money to fix a computer that was not in need of repair. These scams cause hundreds of millions of dollars in harm every year. Now, we can readily speculate why older adults tend to be disproportionately impacted by these scams. Perhaps they are less technically savvy. But make no mistake, though, Many scammers are really good at what they do. I have seen many sophisticated, educated people duped. A couple of other data points from the report I want to mention. One is that the primary point of contact to older adults by scammers is by telephone. No surprise there. Another spike that we saw last year in the data is that it's a huge spike in the use of gift cards as a primary method of payment that the scammers request. And there's not a surprise there, it's for good reason. Gift cards, like wire transfers, tend to be the equivalent of cash. Once they're gone, the money is not retrievable, and scammers know that. Shifting now to consumer education, I hope you're all familiar with our signature consumer ed piece, Pass It On for Older Adults. It's the result of research on what works on how to communicate with older adults and literally to empower them to be the ones passing along critical information. We've added 4 new components to it this past year, one on unwanted calls, one on money mules, another on work at home, and one on home repair. I urge you to take advantage of bulk ordering that piece and distributing it in your communities. Last point I want to make is on spurring research. There's been a lot of discussion among council members and a lot of work done on identifying areas of research and establishing parameters for grant money. This is absolutely critical. Research on intervention, research on messaging, research on minimizing re-victimization. What we have seen anecdotally and what we know from the research that's been done today, the person who receives a call from the Social Security Administration, person who receives something in the mail, if they ask a friend, a family member, what do you think of this? They're less likely to be duped. By the same token, we've seen that where there are interventions by a retailer, by a bank teller, those do have a positive impact on minimizing the likelihood of a consumer being duped. So I encourage everyone to put on their research hats and really do all that can be done so that we can be better at preventing consumer fraud against older adults. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Greisman. Appreciate that. Any questions then for FTC from council members? As Ms. Greisman knows, I'm a big fan of the Pass It On initiative. Been going on now for a number of years. How many years has the Pass It On campaign been underway?
I don't know exactly.
Good number of years, right? Yeah, good work. Thank you again for what you guys are doing over at FTC. We really appreciate it. And thanks for your solid commitment to the Elder Justice Coordinating Council. So we're going to pivot now to the left side and go to Department of Labor. And we have with us today Trevor. Trevor Carlson serves at the Department of Labor. And I don't have your title, so we'll call you the Undersecretary for the Department of Labor.
Appreciate the promotion. Good morning. It is an honor to be here to discuss the Department of Labor's efforts to promote elder justice. This is a topic that firmly falls within the department's mission to foster, promote, and develop the welfare of the wage earners, job seekers, and retirees of the United States. And it is something our Employee Benefits Security Administration, or EBSA, incorporates in its work to help workers save for secure and hopefully long retirement. I want to begin with an update on the project DOL discussed last year, our Missing Participants project to ensure that people receive the retirement benefits they earned. Through our Missing Participants enforcement efforts in FY19, EBSA helped recover nearly $1.5 billion in unpaid benefits for 29,469 missing participants. We expect our efforts in this area to continue, but we also know that most plan sponsors and fiduciaries are taking these obligations seriously too. EBSA's goal is not to get big recoveries for missing participants year in and year out, but to ensure that participants don't go missing in the first place, to ensure that participants receive the benefits they earned without our intervention. I also want to share some of our outreach and educational activities incorporating this topic. This past summer, EBSA conducted its popular annual webcast for workers nearing retirement, along with the Social Security Administration, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Among the topics covered was elder abuse and warning signs to look out for to protect retirement savings as they are distributed. We also have publications for workers nearing retirement, which contain information on elder financial abuse and tips to prevent it. For example, our Retirement Toolkit publication developed with the Social Security Administration and the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, provides information on elder rights and protection against fraud and abuse with contact information for the National Center on Elder Abuse. And this fall, we updated our publication, Taking the Mystery Out of Retirement Planning, which includes information from the National Association of State Securities Administrators with tips on avoiding scams. One of EBSA's important functions is taking calls and electronic inquiries from the public, including workers nearing retirement, with questions and concerns about, among other issues, the retirement benefit distributions. We have 120 benefit advisors across the country answering questions about retirement and health benefits. Last year, they handled over 166,000 inquiries. I'll close with a quick note about the Financial Literacy and Education Commission, which I know many agencies here today participate in as well. The department is leading the Retirement Saving and Investor Education Working Group, which is including elder abuse among the key topics it is addressing. Per the recent FLEC report, the working group is looking to coordinate activities across the broad topics involved in planning, saving, and investing for retirement. With that, I want to thank you for indulging me as I've given our update, and look forward to providing updates again in the future.
All right, thank you, Mr. Carlson. Appreciate that information on behalf of the Department of Labor. Any questions for our DOL colleague? Okay, again, thank you so much for what's happening over there at DOL. We appreciate you guys. Department of Agriculture, we're very pleased to have with us today Kyle Liskey, who serves as the Senior Advisor to the Secretary over at the Department of Ag. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning. It's a privilege to be here at my first EJCC meeting, so it's an honor and privilege to be here representing Secretary Perdue. More likely than not, when you hear Department of Agriculture, elder justice issues are not what first come to mind, but at USDA, we have a much larger mission than just ag commodities or production agriculture. In fact, we've got a whole mission area devoted to rural development and all those issues that are involved in rural American life. And so a lot of those aspects are cross-cutting amongst all of our federal agencies, and so we share in that. We're honored to be a part of this organization. And as was mentioned earlier, those elder issues are somewhat unique, and so at the USDA, we have the ability through our research arm to do specific research, although they do a number of other things, but specific research on elder Americans in rural America. But again, as was mentioned earlier, that ability to get information out to rural America is a particular challenge. And so that's sort of where a lot of our effort has been taking place. And USDA, I think, is uniquely positioned in that they have a number of resources, both physical and personnel, deployed throughout America where other agencies might not have resources. And so really tapping into those abilities there is a focus for us. For example, within the Rural Development Mission Area, we have 48 state directors that cover all 50 states. And so our emphasis with them has been disseminating information, whether it's USDA information or other federal agencies information, sharing those best practices, and empowering those state directors to go out and hold stakeholder meetings and just make sure that our customers, our stakeholders are aware and they remain vigilant on these issues. That way we can really focus on the prevention of these types of issues. But beyond the dissemination of information, we also have some resources available at the programmatic level. For example, within the rural development area, we have 3 agencies: rural housing, rural utilities, and rural business. In the rural housing service is really where a lot of this work is done, and they can fund through loans and grants the ability for single-family, multifamily housing, but not just that, but as well as community facilities, which includes nursing homes and first responders, EMT, and distance telemedicine is a focus as well. And so in that vein, the opioid crisis, of course, has been a huge issue, particularly in rural America, and on top of that, the the elder population. And so we have devoted specific resources to that and really deploying those programmatic levels, whether it be distance telemedicine or the physical building of medical treatment centers, in addition to EMTs and first responders to rural America. So I'll just finish with that's sort of where our primary focus is, and we're extremely proud and honored to be a partner with the federal partners at this table, and look forward to continuing to work together.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Liskey. Any questions for Mr. Liskey? I think it's fabulous, again, that you really highlight the rural coverage and the impact that your agency has. That is so critical to these conversations. Having grown up in a rural part of Oklahoma, I get it. Again, just service access, the credibility of your agency. There are so many things you guys bring to the table. So thanks to you and Secretary Perdue for your ongoing commitment and participation in the EJCC. Thank you. All right. Okay, as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, council members, we had a couple agencies who were unable to participate today. One was the Department of Treasury. The second is the Department of Interior. You might recall that the Department of Interior is actually one of our newer additions, and they were at the last meeting unable to participate this meeting, but again, we'll loop them back in for 2020. I will close then in terms of this block of agency reports with the report on behalf of HHS. I put myself last as always, just in case you are long-winded and we run out of time. I would rather be the one that takes the hit on that. So with HHS though, again, a $1.4 trillion federal agency, I think you'll appreciate the number of sister agencies within HHS that we work closely with. And if time allowed, it would be great to be able to kind of break that out for you. But you're certainly aware of CMS, and I know we have some colleagues from CMS in the room. CMS is such a critical partner and sister agency within HHS, along with Indian Health Services, SAMHSA on the mental health side. We work closely, of course, with the Surgeon General's office. You might recall last fall, we made elder abuse kind of a platform item for the Surgeon General. So around Christmas, which is a time we all know, we see a spike in elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation. He helped do a blog, and again, having probably one of the biggest bully pulpits around, it's great to have Jerome Adams' support for this effort. And then at the last meeting, you'll remember us having Brett Joie, who serves as our Assistant Secretary for Health at HHS. So really, I point those examples out to say all of that put in the pot together really, I think, indicates HHS's ongoing commitment to addressing elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation. We at the Administration for Community Living, I would argue, are honored to sort of lead that effort and to coordinate across HHS, and that will be referenced here in my report. I would say that since we've last met, a couple of things to really highlight for you. You did hear from Hillary and Scott today about NAMERS. We're very excited that, again, the National Adult Maltreatment report that is being released and is now available. It's something I really do hope you'll check out. I want to emphasize what Hillary mentioned, and that is having the participation of every state's APS program in reporting that data and doing so voluntarily, which we all know as federal agencies, it's sometimes more the stick than the carrot. But in this case, they really see the value of reporting, so we're very proud of what's happening with that 100% participation from all states and territories. And of course, we're proud of APS's ongoing efforts as Bob Blancato and others continue to champion, and we would certainly agree APS is such a critically valuable community-based program, but yet so underfunded. And, you know, part of that is just the way states organically grew that program, and some support from different states is higher than others. And I think what we would love to see at ACL is more of an equalizer and to really see all states raise their commitment to supporting APS programs and not increase reliance on federal funds. Again, at ACL, we're honored to give APS a small portion of their budget through the dollars we're appropriated. Another item to report to all of you is that we're proud of the partnership between us and CMS to initiate a project to use cutting-edge data, to initiate a project to use cutting-edge data science to explore predictors of elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation. This effort has the potential to advance exponentially our knowledge and understanding of the risk factors for maltreatment. So again, CMS is such a critical partner. They've been mentioned now several times by several different agencies, and we all know that they are a key player in all of this, and we're grateful for their ongoing support and the collaborative work that we do together. And I want to reference something on that here in a minute. So back to APS in September, our agency made 10 new grants to state APS agencies to improve their data collection capabilities and service delivery for older Americans across the country. And this brings the total number of state APS programs that receive funding from us to 32 out of 50 states. ACL also awarded 6 new legal assistance enhancement program grants, and these new grantees will also contribute to improvements in civil legal response to elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation. HHS also initiated a new intra-departmental initiative, which references kind of the tie-in to all the other sister operating divisions within HHS. We call it the Adult Maltreatment Prevention Working Group, which has been in place now not quite a year, which really is our effort within HHS to better coordinate and plan efforts that prevent and address elder maltreatment. So again, given the variation of agency sizes represented here at EJCC, if your agency might want to borrow from that model, we hope that it will work well within HHS to have the same sort of conversation we're having now. So again, given the size of many of our agencies, that may be something to consider. And our group has actually had a couple different meetings, and we've just got a long list of things we're ready to tackle. And I think 2020 will be great for our HHS AMP, Adult Maltreatment Prevention Working Group effort. So then let me kind of wrap up. I want to also highlight for you an initiative from one of our HHS partners. This one is from the Family and Youth Services Bureau's Family Violence Prevention and Services Program within the Administration for Children and Families. So another division within HHS, ACF, Administration for Children and Families. Through a grant from the Bureau, the National Health Resource Center on Domestic Violence partnered with the National Clearinghouse on Abuse in Later Life to produce the Aging with Respect Patient Education Brochure. The resource, geared towards health and social service professionals, provides guidance on how to talk to older patients about healthy relationships and encourages early education about harassment, abuse, neglect, and financial exploitation. You can find the brochure on the Futures Without Violence website by searching for Aging with Respect. And I took a look at that over the weekend, Aging with Respect. So again, that's sort of my report. I will tell you, as Assistant Secretary at HHS for Aging and then Administrator for ACL, when I came into this role, I had 5 pillars. This was one. So for those of you that don't know, this is a major priority for us at ACL, will continue to be. Some of that stems from personal experience. And I know within the council, we've all likely had personal experiences. And I can tell you that even within this role, and I'll jump on this soapbox for half a second, I think for us to fully eradicate abuse, neglect, and exploitation, we really have to embrace that effort at the family level and within our own families. I know, having been in this role now a little over 2 years, I've had several instances where within the Robertson family there have been abuse, neglect, and exploitation that has taken place, and that is shameful. And it's frustrating that the resource that my family has, i.e. this guy, sometimes you're looped in well after the fact, and you begin to wonder, why can't I have more proactive family conversations so that people know where to turn, what to look for, how to approach those uncomfortable conversations. And in some cases, I think we could begin at the family level preventing some of these situations from happening. So I know anytime I have a chance to speak about this particular issue, I try to remind those in the audience that really it all begins with us, each and every family and household represented. So with what time is left now, I think what we'll do is pivot to closing remarks. We're actually just a few minutes ahead of time, so that's great. And actually then, before I pivot to closing remarks, any final remarks or comments, questions, thoughts from any council members before we close out the meeting? I applaud your bladder control. If you're like me, a 3-hour meeting is plenty long. But I think we've done a great job, and I've really been pleased with what I have heard. I wrote down a few themes. I took down several pages of notes, as I know some other colleagues did too. Always great takeaways from these conversations. For me, I thought some of the themes that emerged early on in our meeting, we talked about, of course, abuse in institutional settings, and how, while again that is, in terms of overall percentages, a fairly small percent of what we know to be abuse cases, since many of those cases are occurring out in the community setting. But again, just really knowing that both CMS, of course, is in the room, as well as our friends from OIG and other groups that I know are all working together to really, as best we can, address some of the institutional situations that we continue to see, whether that is, of course, in nursing homes or assisted living or any sort of congregate setting. And I think that that commitment remains very high. And I know that Tony mentioned the AG, and then, of course, we all know from the White House that remains a priority for them. So as a council, we want to continue to make sure that we give the attention that is due there, but also recognize how really so much of the abuse is occurring happens in the community, and that's where really the breadth of all 14 agencies participating in the EJCC, I know that's where we're all leaning for the most part. So again, that was one of the themes that I thought emerged. The other obviously was the importance of data. I would say that of the 4 or 5 EJCC meetings we've had since I've been here, this has been the one that really was probably dominated by the conversation around data, somewhat because of the Namers update, but then also I think I heard from many of you in your respective agency reports that commitment to the data, the value of what we know data can offer us. So again, we know that criticality remains. Another is about collaboration. And I wrote down in my notes probably a dozen different examples that I heard from different agencies about collaborative work that's happening across the council, and that's exciting, that's encouraging. That's not fully reflective either in our respective reports. I know there's many, many other things we didn't even report on, but I can't stress enough that our charge by statute is as a council to continue to focus on coordination. So being here and being part of these meetings certainly is a great step, but then really rolling up the sleeves and getting busy one-on-one, agency to agency, that's really where I think we can continue to accomplish some great things. I know at ACL for HHS, we have a super strong relationship with DOJ, and knowing what Tony and the Attorney General are committed to doing is just so encouraging. Because I think if that weren't there, there would be a real absence of how we can enforce what we know is attacking elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation. That's through that enforcement arm that DOJ presents. So again, so glad for that partnership. I'll also point out the relationship we have with CNCS, again, as a community-based partner, somebody with a local level network that is really pretty phenomenal. It's great that we're really pulling in agencies like CNCS who also have a lot to contribute. And of course, across the table, all 14 agencies I know remain committed to this, and collaboration will continue to remain key. And then finally, I wrote down as a 4th point, public awareness. All of us are doing, obviously, as a priority for the work that we do, some sort of push out. How do we make sure people are aware? Again, tying back to personal experience, even though we may give them this information, sometimes we need to revisit that once, twice, 3 times to make sure individuals we're visiting with understand it, and that they don't only rely on it when they need it, but that they can also in their own communities become advocates. Maybe they're blessed and don't have personally different abuse, neglect, and exploitation circumstances in their own home, but they likely know people in their congregation or circles that they run in that could use that information. So really, how do we build a cadre of trained and educated professionals who can take the information we all provide and continue to move downstream? So again, that's sort of just a real quick thematic recap from what I picked up. Again, I just think that there's continued support and a growing excitement at the highest levels within the federal government to continue championing this conversation. I know just within the last few months, conversations we've had with the White House Domestic Policy Council just continues to reinforce their commitment to this. And again, I really hope that for the calendar year 2020, we can, as a council, continue to advance the work that we're doing. I know for us, it's also that research agenda that we've sort of identified. We also have, and I want to thank each of your agencies because we have cleared now our EJCC report to Congress. So I think that'll be out the door soon, and probably by our next meeting, we'll be able to talk a little bit about kind of the summation of that. Certainly for non-council members, that's an exciting document to take a look at that I think in a way sort of captures what you heard today, broadens it a bit for each agency, but as a document, I think really reinforces where the federal government's at and making sure this is a priority issue for us to address. The only way to make American communities the best they can be is to help eradicate and get rid of abuse, neglect, and exploitation, particularly of the vulnerable adults who are older. Last week, Thanksgiving, hopefully all of you recovered. I know the gentleman that we drove over with said he gained 10 pounds. I think he was joking, but I know that we all enjoyed, and certainly Thanksgiving always causes me, as it probably does you, to pause and say, man, so many people I want to thank. So let me quickly close by just thanking some key folks who made today's meeting as valuable as we hoped it would be. And I want to start off by thanking our first panel. So Dr. Teester, Mr. Blancato, and Ms. Smantaka. I'm never going to get your name right, Lori. I'm sorry, wherever you're at. I'm just going to call you Lori. But thank you so much to the three of you for the information you presented and your insights. And I believe it's been very helpful to have that information as an EJCC. And again, I think I would challenge fellow council members to go back and read their written testimonies. It doesn't take a ton of time to go back and kind of review that and remind yourself what those three individuals shared with us relative to their perspectives. I also, of course, want to thank Hillary, or in my notes it says Miss Dallin. I've never called you that, but Miss Dallin, thank you. And Mr. Corey Scott, thank you. Again, the information you both provided on Namers was incredibly helpful. So thank you for the important work that you're involved in. And, also, I think that who's our partner here? Mr. Urban, sorry. Mr. Urban, are you still here, sir? You're probably raising your hand, but given the lights, I can't see you. So we hope you're, oh, there you go. Okay, thank you, Mr. Urban, for how involved you are. And my apologies that I blanked on your name, but we're thankful that you're so involved in the Namers effort. Also, of course, I want to thank the individuals, particularly members of the ACL team that helped put this meeting together. As all of you know, these sorts of meetings don't just poof happen. It takes a lot of work. So again, I want to thank our folks. You got to see Hillary, who sort of champions that office. Her boss is here, Edwin Walker, who is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Aging, really kind of a pillar within the network. So grateful for the leadership that he provides. And then members of Hillary's team, Elizabeth, Aisha, Stephanie, again, various ACL folks that help make this event happen. And that starts with, again, getting a date on the calendar and finding a location, and then bugging every participating council agency to make sure they have somebody here. All of that takes work. So thank you so much to our team at ACL for helping with that. And of course, I'm incredibly thankful to each of you as a council member. It means a lot that you spent your morning here with us. I think it really signifies the dedication that we all have and the unity that we have in supporting this particular effort and the coordinating council. So again, I know that you being here is important. You believe in it. Your agency believes in it. You're all representing, hopefully, cabinet level members who also believe in this. So again, thank you so much for championing this conversation within your organization. Each one of our agencies, I believe at least each agency, has a working group member. So again, those are career staff often who are very committed to this and meet monthly. And I just want you to go back and thank them, if you would, for me, and just tell them, hey, thanks so much for taking the time and for being our champion within our respective agencies for this conversation. I know I am incredibly grateful for Hillary and the leadership she provides to the working group. So please do go back and encourage those individuals. I want to thank everybody who also listened in and who came here today. Again, having a group that can kind of listen in and help participate gives stronger credibility to what we're talking about and the purpose of us gathering as a council. So again, thanks to those of you that listened online, and for those of you that came here to watch. We know that you're the boots on the ground, many of you, and we have participating agencies that are here, as well as a lot of different national associations that operate in this space. So thanks so much to all of you. And then I would remind all of us in closing that there is still time until the end of December to submit comments online. So if you go to acl.gov, you can submit feedback that you might have. Maybe it's about something you heard at this council meeting, but more applicably, if there's some best practice or thought about that you have that could help guide EJCC for 2020, we would like to hear about that. And while you're on there, while you're on the acl.gov website, you can grab the Namers report, remember, the post today. So we hope you'll do that. And then again, we'll have updates on the report to Congress and other different things that will be great tools for you to take advantage of. Feels like we're done. Do you guys have anything else? Any other final closing comments or remarks from council members? Okay, then seeing none, as chair, it's my honor to go ahead and close the December 2019 Elder Justice Coordinating Council. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your participation.